Nico, let me think about it.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today is Wednesday, May 24th. I'll call this meeting to order and note that we have a full committee present. Councilor Shoup and Hamel are joining me. First action is to approve minutes from our May 4th meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. And now we're here for a workshop to first off, review our capital plan, and then we're going to review in detail the police and fire EMS budgets. We have a good representation of senior staff here with us tonight. Appreciate you guys all coming and joining us and bearing with us as we try to understand that there's a lot that's kind of been put in front of us in the budget. And today is mostly about you talking to us about the ask. We'll ask some questions, I'm quite sure. And hopefully we'll understand what you're looking for a little better by the end of the meeting, so that when we make our final recommendations to the full council, we can do so in an informed manner. With that, the first block of our meeting is for capital equipment and projects. And I don't have a particular order to walk through these in, but I thought we'd actually go down the list, which is pretty comprehensive, and talk about the need and the ask and the funding source. I don't know if you want to break it up by department, Tom. It's kind of organized that way in the budget book.
Yeah, I think, I direct your attention to tabs 4 and 5. I think if we work from tab 4 and just kind of work down through as they present themselves, seems logical.
So I don't have tabs in front of me, but that would be the fire department.
Yes,
Right?
so it's on page 24. You have that.
Do you think we can bring it up on the screen too? I have.
Well, while Liam's doing that, just a couple of comments off the top in terms of the capital budget. I'm stating the obvious. It looks way out of whack because it does include 137,500,000 for a new school. So backing that out, just to kind of level set things, so it's about a $10 million capital plan. I would say that I've listened intently to past councils about reducing our amount of bonding as best we can. And I haven't done a year-over-year comparison, but it strikes me that the over 2.2 million proposed to be appropriated to support the capital plan is a higher number than normal, if you will. And that's really a direct result of hearing that advice and heeding it. So here we are.
Yeah.
This is the overview, just very quickly, and we'll go into the different components. So this first one is fire, and as I said, you'll see at the bottom there, the 2.2 is the total amount to be proposed to be appropriated in support of this, and then you'll see the various other funding sources that we're recommending, a number of different reserves, and then of course bonding for the major high value items.
Very good. So we'll go into the fire department. Under equipment, we have major station maintenance, which looks like something that's recurring each year. Can you give a little color to that? What does that relate?
Sure, and you're right. This is something that we try to make these investments pretty consistently, nearly every year. This upcoming year, FY24 proposal is to repair and replace HVAC systems at Black Point and Dunstan stations. And there's also some door work for North Scarborough Pine Point that's contemplated as well. Chief, you want to come up?
Thank you, Sean. Welcome.
Please, please do.
So if I may, just a correction to that major state. As you know, we have 6 fire stations that we have to maintain currently, and each one of them requires some sort of upkeep throughout the years. This year, the HVAC systems in both Black Point and Dunstan stations have reached the end of their useful life. Honeywell has notified us that they no longer have some parts that would make it. So it's not a complete renovation of the HVAC, but some items that can bring it up to speed that will get us a few more years out of running that system. Regularly right now at Dunstan and Black Point, they're emptying buckets in the summer from the condensate that comes from the heat pumps and things like that. So that was one of the priorities for this year. And the doors at the stations is separate. That was in fiscal year 23 that we still haven't been able to bring to fruition with the contractor. They just finished Dunstan and Black Point from 22. So they're working through some of those things. The second part of the money is renovations to bathrooms at Dunstan and Black Point. Both those stations, the shower at Black Point, you step in it and they've already fallen through the ceramic piece or the plastic piece of the shower pan. There's some really significant issues at Black Point that need to be addressed. And also making sure that we're compliant with unisex and different things like that. We need to upgrade those 2 bathrooms in those 2 stations. So that's what that 100,000 will be used for.
So it looks like you budget 100,000 a year. If you have a surplus from, something that maybe wasn't executed the prior year, you carry it forward and vice versa.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we use that to, again, with essentially 5 stations that we have to maintain out of this budget. The public safety building has a separate budget that's kind of woven into the town hall budget. That's a reasonable amount, in my opinion, to keep those 5 stations.
Just generally enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Any questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and I don't want to get off into talking about the staffing plan because I know it covered a different time and you've given a lot of thought to that. We're focusing on capital, but I do have a general question about, the plans for us to maintain those facilities. I mean, I understand we've had difficulties with staffing them, so there's not a lot of people, or in some cases, no people domiciled there anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So we're really just keeping them open to house equipment, right? To house ladder trucks and that sort of thing, pumpers and so forth.
So currently 2 of the stations don't have regular staffing in them. One of the 2 of the stations that don't have regular staffing in them have students still in them at Pine Point. So there is a need to keep those from going to mothballs essentially and keep those up. But that is part of our, and we'll probably talk about that a little more shortly, but that is part of our bigger plan. The senior staff that I built, our goal for this year is to really establish and understand what we need to right size, right place. And really, we've only been together for a little less than a year, and we really want to come up with that plan to be able to say, this is the right place to invest money. There was a pretty significant, almost a $500,000 request a year or so ago in the capital improvement plan for building, but we didn't have a plan. We didn't have what we were going to do with it. So we abandoned that, knowing that we wanted to come up with a better plan to be able to present to you.
Great. So I look forward to hearing more about that. I know you
Yep.
put a lot of time and effort into that. I'm, read through some of the material already. I did have a question though, about the fire pumper, replacement, I guess, or the rescue unit.
The rescue unit.
So it's the big numbers like that that kind of hit all of a sudden in one year that kind of catch attention. So can you tell me a little bit about what the schedule is for replacement? And it does seem to me that we have a, pretty disciplined approach to that, and that we're, it seems like we always buy new, or, and I know we search for deals, we get them. I know we've approved some on an ad hoc basis because of the opportunity to take advantage of something that was seemed to be a good value. But could you speak to that? I mean, the 415 for the rescue unit, the need?
Sure. So the rescue unit that we put in there initially, I believe there was a pumper that was going to be in fiscal year 24, but we swapped that around. We really want to put a pin in the EMS side of the house, especially after COVID, and our ambulances really took a beating over that last 3 years. They were exclusively used. They were on the road every day transporting patients, and a lot of the decon that we had to do based on COVID ruined a lot of components inside the truck. So it kind of moved up our plan. On the average, we try and replace the ambulances every 5 to 7 years, depending on the mileage. And we really rely on the records from Public Works, that they provide great records to us about mileage, the cost. We try and find that balance between when they start costing us more money to repair than it is to replace them. So
And this piece of equipment is at that point.
that it is, yeah, this is our backline rescue, the third ambulance that isn't staffed yet, but it is a spare. But it's being used way more as a frontline truck because of some of the issues that we've been having with some of the other trucks. So this will complete the question.
I was to say, Councilor Hamlin, you might be interested to know that in the current year, we actually are supporting the purchase of 2 similar rigs through ARPA funds, so non-local tax dollars. And even this one is being funded using rescue revenue, so it's not general taxation.
And we have adequate staffing to make sure that these vehicles are staffed, so it's not like, you know, at least with equipment, the ARPA funds are there. We keep the equipment with ARPA funds for staffing, you know, we keep the staff and the money goes away.
We are at the absolute minimum for ambulances in this community. The amount I'm sure you hear the sirens all day long through town, but we maintain 3 ambulances. One is considered a spare, but it's being used so often. The fire engine at Oak Hill will cross staff over to that when we get multiple extra calls before we call mutual aid. We'll use that truck. So we are really at eventually in a couple of years, we may have to talk about keeping one of the old ones and have that as the spare and have 3 trucks on the road. But currently we only staff 2 ambulances, one at Oak Hill, one at Dunston.
Great, thank you.
And one
Counselor
of-
Shu?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned from you when we met, if I'm wrong, I didn't realize that EMT and ambulance is actually a majority of the calls that you're responding to. And so I think that was a perspective. Because this is actually, when you're talking about fire trucks and ambulances, you're like, we're using ambulances for a lot more.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the COVID context to realize that you guys, the work and wear and tear that were going on.
Chief, what is the percentage of calls EMS to
We're
fire?
creeping on 80%
Wow.
for EMS versus fire, realistically.
And that percentage continues to climb.
And the demographic lens to that, Scarborough has a fairly large elderly population that relies on emergency medical services for not only transports, but also public assistance and going out and helping them get up, things like that. And then the other piece is the medical facilities and the healthcare facilities within this community have really put a definite burden on that service.
So I'd say if any area that's been impacted by growth in town, and it's obvious, it's rescue EMS calls. They've skyrocketed over the past decade. And to the extent where you're not sure that 3 ambulances is going to be enough in a couple of years, right? You're starting to plan.
I think that's certainly, if we continue on the trend we're going, we're going to have a conversation about maintaining a 4th ambulance. Just, by the advice of the Public Works Fleet Services, that the 3 ambulances, the 5 to 7 year mark to keep them, the mileage we're putting on them and the wear and tear is not going to keep up if we don't have a spare that we might be able to put in the rotation. And we regularly rotate the trucks from one busy house to a less busy house, so it's not getting as much mileage. We try and keep that up as well.
And keep in mind, we need to have, at this point, 2 always available. We don't have a choice otherwise. So
Yeah.
that spare is not a luxury. It's for, even routine maintenance,
Yeah.
much less major repair. We need to be able to always run 2 ambulances regardless. So it's really essential.
The number is big, Counselor. I think that is, I think all of us in this industry are shocked by the price increases to ambulances. If you told me 10 years ago, we'd spend this amount of money on an ambulance, I would say no way, but it's just the way that the market has gone.
Talk to me about portable radio replacement. How often do you do that? What does that relate to?
So it's been 20 years since we did anything with portable radios, and it wasn't something that was before I came on that was on the schedule or the CIP schedule. And unfortunately, a couple of years back, we received some feedback from the labor side of the house with some concerns about the safety, the reliability of the radios. And we tried to come up with a plan at that point to say that we really do need to, those radios are the ones they're taking into a burning building. They're taking, they're making calls to the hospital with patient information, whatever it is, that's really their lifeline. The radios we did have from 20 years ago were not fire rated or fire based radios. They were simply something off the shelf that were bought at the time that were probably reasonably priced. And last year, we were fortunate enough to get that first phase one of getting portable radios for all our full-time staff, getting them on the trucks. But we still have several other areas that we haven't finished that project up, and we'd like to put that to bed this year.
You think 100,000 will be enough to do that?
Plenty, yes. Yeah.
So this one, because it's a non-recurring type item, I think it's actually a good candidate for bonding. Because you're not going to do it again for 10 years. And I know that there's a vulnerability assessment that happens to be $100,000 that we're looking to find a way to fund as well. I think we'll come up with a letter. Maybe it won't be $100,000. But anyway, just maybe pencil that in. I think we should consider using bonds for that particular item.
And I do believe that when this, after this year, if we're approved, this will put us in good shape for at least 10 years. Yeah. Give or take, replacing something that gets destroyed or damaged or something like that.
What's the turnout gear?
Turnout gear is the firefighting gear that we wear on a regular basis. Deputy Lieutenant, do you mind coming up as well? We've done quite a bit of work to try and figure out the best way to do this. NFPA, we have certain requirements by NFPA and OSHA that require us to replace our turnout gear at a minimum of every 10 years. We have about 123 employees between full-time, part-time, and call company members. Currently, the average age of our turnout gear is 13 years old with some of those classifications of employees. We do keep about $30,000 a year in the operations budget to try and keep up with that. And I think we're lagging behind. And this was an opportunity for us to ask to try and get a jump start. We have new employees that are in our ask this year. We've had several employees in the last couple budgets that we've been trying to get in turnout gear. And it's really important for us to try and get a jump on this project and see if we can't get some replaced this year and move forward because the price continues to go up.
Yes, sir. To the chief's point, the 10-year service life, that is absolute end of life. Oftentimes this gear is over the course of its use, it's damaged and destroyed to the point that it's no longer useful prior to that end date. The things that we've been able to do is identify, as with everything else, the turnaround time over the pandemic was increased even for firefighting turnout gear. We've been able to identify a source that's actually 45 days, best possible price point for the best quality gear that we can get for our people with a rapid turnaround time. So we factored that into this. This first year ask puts us in a place where we have zeroed out anything that is out of date. So all of our members are protected with current, up-to-date, top of the line turnout gear. And it also sets us up for a regular, repeatable, predictable replacement schedule. So this number this year is the heavy lift. Head to toe protection for all the members that need it, to include current members of the organization, projected for any new people that we get into this budget, new positions. Again, this is the big lift. This zeroes us out and it starts building in a plan where we're able to replace X sets of gear every year for infinity on a regular basis, where we're not asking for a big number of sets of gear.
Now, every call member has their own gear or is it shared?
No, everybody has, it has to be, for the most part, it's fitted to that person quite closely, so.
And you keep it all in the station or you take it home with you? How does that?
So most of the time now, they used to allow folks to take that home, but with the concerns with cancer and carcinogens, we have the public safety building built in actual space to make sure that we had storage for turnout gear, so they didn't have to keep it in their car, so their kids are in the car smelling it, whatever it is. So they usually keep it either at a station. Some will still keep it in a bag in their car in a trunk, but we try and discourage them from having it right in their vehicle. But it is theirs. It's assigned to them. They accept it, they inspect it, they take care of it.
Any other questions on fire equipment? No. You good? All right.
Councilor Calucci, just to your prior point, in terms of candidate for bonding, that's something you could probably put in that list for consideration if you wished, just given its longevity.
The turnout gear?
Potentially.
It's a similar situation where we're not going to be doing that every year. We're going to be, the operating budget is going to be covering the ongoing replacement. And that's a good thing to use debt for, is the anomalies.
Yeah.
The recurring ones I have a little more of an issue with, because you're spending that every year. There's no great reason to issue debt
So traditionally, we carried that line, that in the operational line to replace, but it really has not been keeping up. For the amount of people, now that we're at a certain age with certain gear, we're at that point where we really have to try and make a little bit of an investment to get us ahead. To allow us to have that 30,000 that's usually carried in the operations budget to move that along.
So maybe we'll be paying for a plow truck out of cash if we do that. Yeah, I would like to kind of tag
Okay.
that.
I made a note. We can come back to
Consideration
it.
for bonding.
I just have one follow-up question. This steps off a little bit away from, the capital equipment discussion, but it does get to the point of impact fees and cost to serve. As we're going through various exercises to try to, estimate the impact of population growth and so forth in the town, and we're talking about, the benefits from the TIF and captured value for the town. But we have not really taken a deep dive and look at impact fees and how the increase in demand on services, particularly essential services, is very high and very costly. Are we confident that we were capturing those appropriately and how we calculate cost to serve and how we are charging developers in terms of the impact fees for growth? This is a question for the town manager, but I thought as long as we're here.
I'm scheduled to provide an update on a plan, a framework of a plan, and I think it will actually have sufficient detail, I believe on June 7th.
Great.
So I can't speak directly to whether or not there's even the ability through the law, much less the practical ability of impact fees for fire and EMS related services. But there's a suite of things that we can charge for.
Yeah.
And that will be the focus of my conversation.
Great. Yeah, I would look forward to learning more about that. I have the nagging fear that there's a gap, that it's really costing us more than we're really getting reimbursed in terms of fees from developers. Not to pick on anybody, just like I'm having a hard time with trusting and verifying. I'm kind of eager to verify then trust.
It's complicated. You want developers to pay their fair share. In this case, it's more that we have Maine Med campus here. We've got a number of senior facilities.
It's good news. That stuff is, those facilities.
They
are
don't
close
pay
by.
for, they don't have any kids in the schools, but they have a pretty good burden on the
Yeah.
fire department.
And I always kind of separate, the EMS side of the house. While we don't get one for one, we do get a pretty significant amount of revenue for providing that service from a lot of those healthcare facilities. Scarborough's very lucky that our reimbursement rate with is pretty high.
Well, that's good to hear.
That's actually a good point. So the ambulance is actually being paid for by what we bill people that are being transported in the ambulance.
Great.
Should we jump to fire projects after? Should we?
Sure. And I was just going to say, just generally, the way I look at fire protection, I think is best viewed as almost an insurance policy. I mean, the best news would be that we never have to go fight a fire, but you darn well want to make sure you have the proper staff, training, and equipment when that call comes in. And so I don't know that it lends itself perfectly well to a fee-based system, if you will.
I hear you. I just recall a recent incident that was off the Black Point Road where you had, there were several, pieces of equipment there, and you had, I think both of the EMS vehicles were there. So it was pretty impressive that how quickly you turned out, but it's a reminder that you need this stuff when things happen. So thank you.
So I stand corrected. Do we not have any projects for the fire department this year? Any capital projects? Sorry,
No, they're all lumped together.
they're all in equipment.
Yeah, we used to separate equipment and projects a little more distinctly. I think you'll find that they're all shown together here.
Beg your pardon, talking about vehicles or we?
So yeah, equipment's typically vehicles. I mean, your major statement maintenance could be a project, but it sounds like it's mostly HVAC, so that would be considered equipment.
Okay.
I was looking for another section for the fire department and
Don't have one.
No, there's one.
you're done. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
See you shortly.
The next up is the library.
No, I don't see Nancy here, but I can report, you might recall when she was here presenting her budget, she did make you aware that the solar buyout, that they do not want to pursue that, so we can reduce their capital ask by 33,000. In the next breath, she mentioned there's a failing HVAC system that will need attention. I just found out this afternoon that the estimate for that work is 13,500. She previously hinted that it might be close to 30, so I see that as a bit of a win. So I intend to put in front of you for your consideration next meeting, removing the 33 and adding in a new HVAC project of 13.5. Okay.
So we can move on to admin, Tom. A
You
couple of
ready?
Heroes.
Yes. So the first project is, let's see here. Gotta get my organization.
Duct maintenance. and-
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is something that it took me a while to understand, but the facilities management team here, custodial team, has really convinced me that these are systems that we need to take care of. They're very high dollar values. So, and it also is a health and safety matter for those of us that work in this environment. So this is a full cleaning of all the ductwork in the building in town hall. It's quite an arduous task. They actually physically enter each one of these ducts, clean it, and it has to be a controlled environment. So it's a fairly costly endeavor, but really for all those reasons, health and safety of staff, but also maintenance of high dollar value equipment, we would like to stay on track in that regard.
29 Black Point Road is the building that we lease, correct?
Correct.
You're gonna be doing ductwork
Same.
as well?
Same rationale, yes. And then the final one is installing a meter. When we built the public safety building, we went to great lengths to tie it into the tri-generation system here. Unfortunately, there's no separate meter, so it would be great to be able to kind of track separately the electric use. And so that's been a constant battle for us. Really, the municipal building electric account reflecting both buildings. So we would love to be able to separate that out and be able to track that separately. And so this is installing a separate meter and software that we can do just that.
That's interesting. So for the school department's use of the second floor, do we pick up the electricity for that?
Yes. Before my time, and I think this is a function of the state funding formula, if a school department was in a lease situation, leases were reimbursable, for lack of a better term. When that went away, I'm told, and again, before my time, we stopped charging, charging rent, if you will. And so we assume all of those costs, building maintenance, utilities, so forth.
And Tom, I seem to recall they're really going, Tri-Gen was running at a deficit, but I recall speaking with their banking,
Mhm.
a month or two ago, said that it's profitable. Is that confirmed that system is now not profitable?
It's been down for several months, to be honest with you. But frankly, I think that's been a godsend. Well, I shouldn't say that. With electric rates spiking in the last couple of months, this is when we should be running it. But a big part of the spike in electrical costs is natural gas pricing. And that's the fuel source for this facility. So it is a game, not a game, but it's the balance between natural gas costs and electric expense, frankly. Interestingly, this system was built in terms of sizing for cooling. Believe it or not, that's the highest demand of this building. You'd think in this climate, it would be the heating season. It's actually the cooling system that puts the greatest demand. So we're just going to back up and running, I think, at the exact right time as we enter cooling
But I
season.
think it's closer to break even than West 19.
Yes.
Quite a while. Okay.
Yes. And that's another reason we'd like that meter, so we can have a better sense of in allocating costs and understanding where usage is and how the Tri-Gen is supporting each.
Thank you.
The final piece is Pine Point Pier. We did undertake an engineering study just to assess the structural integrity of both piers. I call it pedestrian pier. It's the old 50-year-old pier that existed there. It's still there, and it's really dwarfed by the new commercial pier. You almost don't even notice it. But there are many cross braces that were actually fallen off, and it was really a safety hazard. So much so, we actually closed it for use late last summer, early in the fall, and it remains closed. So this is an estimate to actually come in and not fully rebuild, but do a fairly significant structural rebuild to make sure that it's safe for the public. And I'm proposing that we appropriate those funds. As an aside, I will mention there is a Pine Point Working Waterfront Reserve that has a balance of about 53,000 right now. So that's an option that you could consider. And I believe Councilor Hamill's also going to mention another project in that vicinity that we might as well bring up at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to begin though by thanking Tom and staff for his support, his personal support. He's actually devoted time to attend committee meetings with the Coastal Waters and Harbor Committee that has responsibility for maintaining the working waterfront. There's a working waterfront covenant that was put in place when the pier was built. But we have not really kept up with the maintenance year after year. So the past year or so, we've refocused on that, and with the help of the committee and also Tom's help and Gene O'Neill, who's the harbor master, we've been able to get money restored to the Working Waterfront Fund. Parking fees, some parking fees go into that fund. It's also funded by a parking lease. So we're pleased to say we've replenished those funds, and that Tom mentioned the improvements we're going to make to the pedestrian ramp. But in addition to that, we've had 2 working cranes on the working pier that have not really been maintained very carefully, and they've been used extensively by commercial fishermen for quite some time. Both of them are near the end of their useful life. So we have an amount of, I think, it's $75,600 that will be a capital expense for replacing these cranes. So I want to thank him for his help with that and shepherding it through the process and getting it on the list.
Yeah, just on this project, it came late March, so kind of after I had completed my budget proposal. As Councilor Hamel mentioned, I've been intimately involved in this. The reality is, I think the original cranes they certainly have been a constant challenge. They've been down as much as they've been operable. Frankly, I don't think they were spec'd properly. They really don't withstand the sort of harsh marine environment that they exist in. And so, though we looked at a number of choices, including partial replacement and repair, I think at this point, if there is appetite, and I know the users of the pier very much want to replace them with the proper equipment for good. And so, as was mentioned, I would suggest 76,000 just to be safe. But this quote was less than 60 days ago, so I'm quite confident in the number.
Should be pretty good.
Yep.
Now, do we use the cranes a lot?
So they're not used broadly. In other words, there's a handful of people who use them extensively. There are a couple operators who drag for clams and a couple of seafood processors that use them extensively. So part of the issue is and we'll be working to try to do a better job of training and certifying people in the use of these cranes, the proper use, as well as ongoing maintenance and repair on an annual basis, which we're probably going to try to do through expense rather than capital. So we're going to pay more attention to it. Number one, do a better job of training and managing its use. Number two, and then making sure that we're going to be funded.
And we need both. We need 2.
Yeah.
You really do. Yeah, they do support all the commercial fisheries that work off that pier. I think there are some recreational users that will use them as well. All mooring holders pay a pier use fee, and so technically they have access. So if you have a large party going out, and it's tide dependent, the tide swings are quite large. So just getting anything of any weight, even a cooler, down onto a boat can be a challenge.
Most of the individual diggers kind of carry their clams in and out in smaller boats, but you do have commercial boats that come in and out of there, mainly lobster. There's live lobster equipment and of lobsters and lobster traps, but also there are big barrels of surf clams that with the
and bait barrels for lobster. So they are heavily used. And
Do we charge per use?
not specifically, it's covered through the pier use fee.
Pier use fee. Okay.
And as was mentioned, there's about $22,000 a year. It's starting now because of council action last month that will be flowing into this fund directly. on an annual basis, and that hopefully will keep up with capital needs in the future.
Yeah, we estimate that the service and maintenance would be on $25,000 a year range.
So hopefully that will be funded from the.
That's the plan.
So I'd like to make a motion or just add it to our carry forward list, but see what the committee thinks. With the Pine Point Pier, which is currently set to be appropriated for $50,000, like to move that to be paid for with reserve funds because we have 56,000 in the account. And then also add to the capital plan the $76,000 to replace the two cranes. And those monies would be appropriated, collected from the taxpayer.
I have
So
a
we're-
question.
yeah.
So with the working waterfront fund, since we just raised the mooring fees, is that where all the fees go?
Yes,
into
so
that?
that's a great question. In the past, the commercial use fees all went into the working waterfront fund for residents and non-residents. This year, we made a change, an ordinance change. So all of the mooring fees will go into that fund as well.
So you added to it.
So we've added to
You
it,
added.
and that will be a renewable source, an annual source of funding. And it probably should have been directed there in the first place, but it was a smaller part of the fees, and we just lost sight of it, but it's easily $20,000 or $30,000 a year. That alone, the mooring fees alone.
And so John, when you're saying you want to use the reserve funds, are you saying from the working waterfront fund?
So there's
That's-
$55,000-ish in that working
Mhm.
waterfront fund today.
Right.
And the pier rehab is 50,000. So yeah, I'm suggesting that we use that fund to cover that expense. But then there's not sufficient funding in the fund to cover the replacement of the cranes.
Right.
And quite honestly, the pier at 50,000, that might be a heavy number. We're certainly not going to spend any more money than we need to get them structurally sound and safe for the public use.
Do you need them all right away? I guess it kind of to your point. So if we delayed that, we could approve the cranes now, but use the funding source of the waterfront fund. For
I'm anticipating about $22,000 in FY24 going into that fund, so
you're just not gonna.
it's still not enough to cover. And of the two, the cranes are more important. People's livelihood is at stake, frankly.
Yeah, there's no doubt we're playing catch up, and it took a crisis to get us to focus on this thing. So it's unfortunate, but we believe that sometimes that's a great motivator.
You think both are worth doing, the cranes and.
No question. And I think because there was such an increase in fees this year, people are going to be wanting to see services and equipment for that. So, or they'll be calling us, and they'll be calling us anyway, but they'll be calling us more often.
So we consensus to, as suggested, add the
Yes.
cranes to the plan and then change the funding source for the pier.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have that.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Like MIS is next. With some nice even numbers, three $25,000 projects or pieces of equipment.
Yeah, with first piece, I believe, is cybersecurity.
We
The
covered
next-
these in our department review
believe
as
so.
well, actually.
Uh, Jen Day is here if you
You're here, you
want to know
might-
more, but
Might as well come up. Somebody new might be watching today. Cybersecurity is a Sophos MDR, right?
Mhm.
And what is it? What, it's software?
It's a service. So right now we sort of have, we have a middle level and we want to go to a more advanced level.
For cybersecurity.
Yeah, and we can kind of get into a lot of the detail of it, offline if you guys have specific questions about it, but I mean, essentially what it offers us is it's MDR, so it's manage, detect, respond. And right now we have manage, detect. The respond piece is on us. So if something's found at, 2:00 in the morning, we will respond, but it's, we've got a group of people who are, small and have to be called, and they may have to come in and actually do something. Whereas if you have this service, you can set up different thresholds for response levels. So if there's a particular threat or vulnerability that's open that is detected, you can set up a threshold saying immediately shut down a service, immediately shut down a port, immediately shut down the whole network, depending on what the threat level is.
And do you refer to this in IT as disaster recovery? Is that what it's called, or is that refer to something else?
Disaster
More
recovery,
emergency response?
I would refer to disaster recovery as something different. That's
see.
if we actually had, so for example, this is not hypothetically speaking, we actually had a fire in the server room last year. And that would be our disaster recovery because there were things that we had to shut down. We had to have the fire department come over. We had cleanup from that. There was obviously like a really significant burnt plastic smell in the building. So the building had to be evacuated. So we had a lot of cleanup from that. So that was sort of disaster recovery. And I always clump it together with business continuity because we needed to have continuity of services, regardless of what happens on our end, whether it's in the server room or, it's actually cybercrime or whatever happens. We still have to be able to provide hopefully uninterrupted services across the town. Otherwise, bad things happen.
And is it one network for both the school and the town? And
We run on the same backbone. I mean, we do have, there are sort of crown jewels that we segregate off. So, those are more protected and harder to get to. But for all intents and purposes, we do run across the same, network fiber backbone.
thanks.
Any questions?
I don't. I think you did a really good job explaining all these at your original. presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you do a terrific job with the resources that you have. So thank you.
This sort of MDR sort of automates things that we don't have personnel to do.
I don't remember hearing many things going wrong, so you respond pretty smoothly already. So, happy to support this.
You probably see in the news, a number of municipalities, certainly in the country across the world, are the subject of pretty serious attacks and ransom paid in many cases.
We never say it's never going to happen. We always say when it happens, because, nobody is invulnerable to these kinds of attacks. So the best that we can do is just try to put as many protections in place as we can.
Very good. Thank you, John. Next is community services. Looks like we deferred all of our equipment this year for community services.
Got caught up pretty good the last couple of years, so we're in a good cycle.
What is it? Oh,
So yeah, equipment wise, we're in pretty good shape. Again, having a great fleet management helps with the recycling. We do a lot of the maintenance in-house now, even a lot of our John Deeres that we're sending out, stocking parts. So we're in a really good cycle right now. You can see things coming up for 2025, and some of those information update we'll get into in the future, but as we hope to expand our staffing level, just to create some efficiency. So all of our stuff this year is coming into the project side of things. Just a quick note, a couple projects that we funded last year and we haven't taken on just to no beach manager, no park manager. And I plan on, if these get moved forward, the first one, Springbrook concession stand, as well as the water fountains and bottle fills at Willie Park. We have those matching from last year. Memorial Park, as well as the two other parks for the water fountains. So the plan would be to, if these were approved, to create specs to do both projects or all four projects at the same time, which may save us some funding, and in contracted service, trying to get those installed. So the first one with the concession stand is really looking at our facilities, which have concession stands as well as restrooms in them. We're evaluating concession stands values. Groups aren't using them as much, but they're dying for storage. So we're going to evaluate, instead of replacing the serving window, do I put a roll-up garage door and create that area for storage rather than having another facility to maintain, or a shed? We've got sheds everywhere in town, storage containers and sheds. So trying to minimize that. So that's something we're going to go through at each site. as well as the bottle fills, just request to, as our parks are being used more, be able to provide that service for folks. They make a pretty neat, what I call a triple filler, water fountain, bottle filler, dog bowl type things. So I'm gonna kind of spec those out in the parks.
Did they go away during COVID? I remember there was a period.
We don't have any. So I take that back. We have a couple at the Springbrook, which that one is on a well, and we discontinued that one because of water testing. So last year's number is a little bigger than Springbrook's number, just because we may have to put a water filtration system when we get into that one, because it's a well. And the other parks are on town.
Great.
Provided water. So Mitchell Sports Complex, this has been an ongoing conversation for years. Initially, we had pulled in last year's CIP, you would remember a much larger number. And the conversation is always, is this a place for a community center, not a community center? Either way, something needs to be done to those facilities. All 4 sets of nets, the footers are rising. Our longtime tennis contractors, these need to be dug up. And once we dig up that middle, God knows what happens to the footers when you pull them out, because they didn't install them way back when. So this would be a overlay project, as well as installing new footers, net posts, getting it safe. If you've been out there, there's a lot of cracking repair. It looks good, but it's pretty wavy and pitchy around the net. So this would be a kind of, I don't want to use the word Band-Aid because it's $90,000, but it gives us time to evaluate what's going on, as well as decide if we were going to make an investment like we were talking about previously, is this location, is it, what does that entail? There's still a big push in this town. I got 2 emails last week on increased pickleball courts. And so part of that's going to be part of the eval of what we do, working through the master plan with the advisory board.
Just anecdotally, I've noticed more tennis play in the last couple of years than the prior 10. And
Yeah.
I don't know what the cause of it is, but on any summer evening night, you'll see every single court busy till after dark.
I think people got a little more refreshed after COVID, picked up some old habits they may have lost. I know during COVID, we didn't do a lot of our youth tennis programs, and those were all back running again and doing well. So you're starting to get kids going to take lessons, which brings out parents to go hit at night after they get off work. So I think you're just seeing that organically starting to come back.
Well, your tennis programs are full very quickly.
Well,
And
yes,
so are these the courts that the high school plays at?
yes.
So I'm a tennis player, so
Yeah.
this is a priority for me. And I'm also going to say that I've consistently said I do not think that's an appropriate place for a community center. It's not big enough, traffic, parking. So when you say 90,000, but yet this is where they compete and this is the only courts around, I mean, what would it take to make them usable? And then
Oh, no, that's more than, sorry.
You have another $1 million, I think.
Yeah,
what's the conversation with like the school and the department, athletics department with their courts and maintenance?
So,
things like that?
this money will get them more than usable. This is an overlay of 2 inches. This is a repaint, reline, new nets. This is more than enough to make them. It's the challenge in that area. It's a wet area, this will get you, 8 to 10 years. And then then we're talking about base again. And that's when you start having cracking like we are and foot is rising, that's heaving, that sort of stuff. So the next, if you wanted to go to, would be a complete removal, recompact the base and start from scratch. The partnership with the school is strong. We're in charge of the maintenance. This is, again, coming in before the taxpayers as a project. And then we, deal with the day-to-day of the courts. So yeah,
Where
this
would
would make it
the
more than 90.
school Play if there was a community center. I mean, 90,000 is a lot.
I can't speak for Tom, but if that was a community center site, I would be kicking and screaming to figure out where we put basketball and tennis courts prior to building a community. We can't be without them,
Right.
is the point.
Yeah, we've done some facility planning. There are a couple of other locations on this campus that could house them. One of them including the old water tower site right up here behind the high school.
I know, Rio.
So there are plans we can dust off, and you're right. If that space is to be used for something else, we would absolutely need to have an answer as to where those existing facilities will go, be
So this
relocated.
is we're not ready to take on one of the bigger projects, but this is a need and this will get us through until we make whatever decision.
Whatever choice the community makes, yes.
I mean, I think it's, the commitment is there for sure. I mean, your 5-year plan is 1.2 million
Yeah.
for tennis courts. So and you've really only got the $500,000 So that you've only got the $90,000 for the court resurfacing
Right.
for the current year. The others are, starting in 2025.
Right.
Fiscal 25. So I get the timing effect.
Yeah.
But it does
And
look pretty
and the other
good.
consideration, just so everybody can appreciate it, is that there's only certain times of the year that a project like this can be done.
Yeah.
And so when you do it, any sort of pavement needs to sit 30 days before you paint it and stripe it. And so that just puts it, just like the track project, when that asphalt gets out, it gets pushed out. So, we approve these June, and so it's really tough to get somebody hanging around ready for September, October without a full project commitment. So sometimes these things can lapse a solid year before you get a contractor in there. So just for.
Is the expectation to do this work this fall?
Yeah, yes, if this was approved, we have a regular scheduled maintenance schedule, and if we could get this done presently, he could keep us in the schedule this fall. Depending on weather and timing, it may be that it gets painted in line in the spring, but it also just depends on the weather of how it taps out, so. So that's that one. So skate park, it's kind of in the same thing. This is kind of a threefold project. One would be to remove we've been repairing cracks and starting to get sinkholes in that area, which makes it very dangerous. And because this was built on asphalt, and they've been there 12, almost 15 years, they start to sink. And so the ramps get, below grade. So this project would be removing those off of the surface, doing a new overlay, and then putting them back. But there's two other pieces to this project. One would be there's some work in the retaining wall that's starting to get a little wavy and falling apart. As well, install 4-foot chain link fence with a gate all the way around. It's a very popular area. Unfortunately, we have a lot of riding off curbs into the road, and public safety vehicles are coming through. So this would give us a visual area to say, please, if you want to participate, this is your area. And so it does a little bit of safety. The other thing it does for us is if we have issues, which we do, we'd be able to lock the fence and hang a sign and say, see you in 2 weeks when everybody behaves better. And it's not me going out there with snow fence and making something, it's legit. So it serves multiple purposes for safety as well as enforcement and just general appeal. So that's what that project is all about.
Just, I would note that we're proposing to use the recreation reserve.
Oh, yeah, I should have
These,
said the same thing.
Effectively, we can call them impact fees, but they're monies that have been paid over time by developers to offset their impact. And we have about $350,000 in that account at this point. So there's adequate funds to cover these. I will say that we're proposing to replace it with a legitimate, if you will, impact fee that's documented and supportable. And we've been advised that we really should spend this money down, frankly.
So after we've got 170,000 in this budget. You said there's 370 in the account,
350.
350, okay, about 180 that will still need to be earmarked somewhere.
You could bring more in to offset some expense in this budget, perhaps, or, I think we can probably work through that in FY25 pretty handily.
I just noted, I'm somewhat new to this, but there's a replacement schedule for everything. And I noticed that with the skate park, the replacement schedule is for 2027. And I guess I'm trying to understand, it's page 56. And I think it was just a comment really, because I'm new to this whole replacement schedule. I see it a lot with the
First time
fire.
we've had it.
Okay, and so that's why I'm saying, okay, well, we have replacement schedules for other departments, and I'm just looking at community services, and it looks like they do have a replacement schedule, and this one comes sooner than what is on the schedule. The comment.
I'm not sure where you're looking at.
So it's tab 6.
It's a little later in the.
Yeah,
book.
so there's a
And it
replacement
comes out of,
schedule. It's
I think, finance.
very boring. It's a spreadsheet.
Okay.
The capital assets over 100,000, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, those replacement dates are really a function of, it's a standard depreciation schedule. So I think really appreciating what Todd's eyeballs tell him and his staff and consultants tell him in terms of when something needs attention is a better barometer. But these are really just standard depreciation schedules here.
And what's the term? What is the
Depreciation?
10-year?
It really depends. It ranges from 5 to 30, depending on the capital asset. Yeah.
Okay. Keep going, sorry.
Okay, so I'm gonna skip the land purchase because that'll probably be the biggest conversation. I'll keep moving down. So in the master plan, we've identified a lot of ADA things that we'd like to deal with, and you can see money spent over the first couple of years. And I should have put parks and beaches there because one of the projects that I'm going to propose in this, if the $50,000 is approved, is I've had a lot of conversations. The proposal was part of, and I sent an email to Liam as far as a photo, but it was originally part of the Herd Park project, and when that got pushed, the project piece got kind of pulled. But I've been meeting with Herd Park residents, and so out of that $50,000, one of the projects I'd like to do this year is install a it's technically a dock system, but it has ramps and wheelchair access for both ends of the beach, as well as viewing on the other side of the dunes. And the nice thing about this system is that it's plastic, it floats, it's finger jointed, it's interchangeable. That's about just over a $25,000 project. But meeting with those residents, there's a couple of residents in wheelchairs, and they can get to a certain point. We've had a lot of education and discussion, and we will have a meeting in August around kind of future of Herd Park as we get into the CIP future years. But we've been asked a lot. Some communities put it's like a rollout mat down to the water, and unfortunately, we just can't do that. Our tides are too high. We'd be brushing sand off it. It would put another couple hours into public work. They'd be digging it out before they clear a beach. So this is a great compromise. It would get us there. The remaining, call it $24,000 of this project, I've got a list that is just striping, parking, signs, walkways to water fountains when we'd have them across grass. I've identified some bleachers at certain parks that don't have pads big enough where a wheelchair could roll up and sit in the bleacher. So trying to pick off some of these spots to bring our level of ADA accommodation up. So, but the big chunk this year would be putting towards that ramp and water system down at Pine Point Herd Park.
And this is a totally portable system. So we would deploy it in Herd Park, and that's where it would stay. But if for whatever reason we wanted to use it somewhere else, you can disassemble it quite easily. And
I think Liam's I sent it late, but just so you can see what it looks like. It's fantastic. The nice thing,
Orchard has one.
they got a rollout mat, but the way this one is that this is actually sections, 10-foot sections, but the ramps are pitched on an inch. So it makes compliance. The nice thing about this is the mat we have there now is like an inch and a half above the sand. And so we're always keeping the sand off it, including the rub rail, which is the dark brown. That would be 17.5 inches above the sand. So that would minimize the amount of sand that's on there for people to use. Part of our daily task list for our staff in the morning when we have staff starting Friday, sweep and blow the task, and then everybody tracks it down. So it's an ongoing, this thing would aid, and you can see where the wheelchairs can roll out, have a place to sit and do some viewing of the beach actually while on the beach. That where those seats are, that would be kind of just maybe 5 or 6 feet off the dune line. So they actually would be on the beach for the first time.
Where do you get this?
This is an Easy Dock project. The rep is out of Brunswick. They're doing this project because in a lot of wetlands now, because they float and sit. So if you get marshy, they float back up. When they dry, they sit. They're about 250 pounds a section, so they're really manageable. So yeah, it's a pretty good product. A lot of this is up at the Travis Roy facility. And so and the nice thing is all these are finger jointed, so you can twist and turn and add to them if you wanted to. You want to create a whole boardwalk out of this in any direction. It's pretty,
And DEP is okay with it as long as you pick it up every year?
as long as it's portable and temporary is the key word.
I'm really interested in this because the sand just keeps coming back.
Yeah. So it's,
And handicapped people don't have a way to get on the beach very easily, even the.
well, and not only handicap, I met with 12 people on the beach yesterday and 2 were walking with canes. So it's mobility, it's strollers, it's, it's everything. So it's
having a consistent surface.
Yeah.
Even just walking through the sand is a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
so.
I like the little spot to sit too.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're looking there. The next thing coming down the list, there's 2 there. One is if you've been to our goal, let me preference this. We are going to be going back to in-person sand in the parks this year. We've been doing the drive-through. We're going to go back to in-person based on staff requests, maybe with a little twist for some drive-through capabilities. But if you haven't seen our holiday Christmas tree, it's in bad shape. it's withering. And the challenge there is that that hill is just set with the drainage. It's, when we dig that up, those roots will be completely white. They're mildew. We have other trees in that run that we've replaced and we've changed them for different, elevated them. So the goal, and this is not, I'll give Bill Reichel credit for it. Our previous parks manager would be to purchase a new tree and relocate it to the head of the amphitheater. So it'd be tree, amphitheater, gazebo at Memorial Park, where it's a nice dry level spot. So this money would get us that purchase, relocation, and funds to bring power to it, to be able to have it lit. And then we'd work through rehabbing that area to deal with those wet. You go down there after every storm and there you're standing in mud. So we have to take a look at that separately. So that's that project. And then there is $15,000 allocated for the turf track complex. As I mentioned in my regular budget, I've got a new standing item there to do this in the parks. This money would be allocated to when the project is done at the turf track. It was only to deal with the track itself and the fencing. But if you walk around the facility, all the walkways have cracks. And when we relocate that, it's going to make a greater challenge for people to walk. So this money would be for, once the project's done, to be able to go back in, crack seal and seal coat the entire piece. There's so many between drains and cracks and fence posts. We're going to start seeing upheaving. And if we don't make the small investment, we'll probably be talking about more overlays and grinding and dealing with something if we spend a little bit. So that's the theory there. And then again, the big number is, and we had this conversation, community center land purchase. There's no land identified. This was brought forward in our conversations with the Community Service Advisory Board. As well as me serving on the school build committee, seeing some of the questions been asked by the community in this board, where, what, cost. This is strictly an identifier. If, the goal is ultimately to be ready to act if something were to come up. That's what this is all about. The number could be 100,000, it could be 1 million. It's really a placeholder for that action. And that was the intent behind it. So
you want to jump into this one? Let me try to wrap up what I think will be an easy one. So it strikes me that every one of the smaller projects that you have on here are almost exactly what the recreation fee was set up for. They all relate to our parks. I think that fee originated out of Black Point Park when it was first coming into fruition. So I just assume, as opposed to asking the taxpayer for those funds, pay for them with developer fees. It would be, it looks like 130,000. We have that money in the account. I'd suggest that we add that to our list. Instead of funding these community services improvements with appropriations, we fund them with the recreation reserve.
Just for my benefit, can you just list those off, make sure I have captured them?
There's, the Springbrook Park concession, 30,000. The Wiley and Black Point Parks, water fountains and bottle fillers for 20,000. The Parks ADA compliance projects for 50,000. Mitchell Hill crack filling, Mitchell Sports Complex, crack filling, and then the holiday tree.
Thank you.
I think these are good ideas because they're tangible. And I think a lot of times people don't have line of sight to the benefits, that come from those fees. So I think having, being able to point to something this is funded by, XYZ is a really good thing.
That's a great point. What do you?
Well, I actually had a comment about the Christmas trees
sure.
first.
Yep.
Because the town that I grew up in was people donated the tree every year, and there was a lot of pride behind finding the tree, donating the tree, and we do live in a pine tree state. So I just wanted to make that comment because it sounds like you're having a hard time maintaining and keeping a tree alive there. And so I didn't know if that was maybe a different alternative that people up here in Maine have tried in the past.
Historically, we did
Oh, okay.
source out a tree every year, and
Yeah.
it was a challenge to locate, cut, transport, safely erect. So the plan was to plant one and go from there. And actually, the one that we're using that has since died was relocated from elsewhere in the park. So it's not to say we can't go back down that road, but it added a level of challenge every year to locate a tree and get it upright, frankly.
Well, maybe if people don't want their taxes to go up, they'll donate a tree. I don't know. John, were you looking me to comment about the land for the rec center?
First, are you okay, instead of using taxpayer money, using reserve funds?
When you say reserve funds, you mean from the impact fees that we
Mhm.
corrected collected in regards to the recreation
Correct.
fee?
Yep.
Right.
Correct.
And how much money is in that fund so the impact fees are obviously separated out by which impact fee they are. So there's a certain fund for recreation impact fees.
There is.
350,000 is the balance. I originally proposed a use of 170. And this is another 150 on top of that. So there are adequate resources to cover what's being suggested.
That seems appropriate.
We'll add that one to the list when we get together.
Yep.
Now we can jump into well, actually, one other that I think will be easy. You have in here in a future year, Herd Park renovations. That was actually approved in a budget 2 years ago. So we actually already have budget for that. We never sent it to voters, but we also never we could dispose of it, but I just wanted to throw that out there that we already have the.
John mentioned that to me.
Budget approved.
I didn't recall it that way, but we can certainly track that back down. My recollection was, it was during COVID. I remember we were all on Zoom. And I believe Councilor Hamel raised some questions about I think it was a $600,000 project.
Right.
And it was Councilor Anderson that suggested, hey, why not fund a master facilities park plan and really understand and assess where our priorities are, which we did. And so my recollection, but we'll verify.
So I don't recollect that. I don't remember that, but when I was trying to tick and tie our
Yep.
capital, what was actually approved in the budget order
Hmm.
matched the total that included that 600,000. So we can look into it. I'm just saying, we're not authorizing funding this year for it anyways, but
No, and so part of, again, you see these futures, and as I explained to Councilor Shupin with our advisory board, and so I can say this and everybody can hear it, we're gonna evaluate these as we look through the master plan and reprioritize. We got the master plan and this was submitted ahead of time. I think everything we're looking at this year is prudent. I think what we've looked at in the future is just a matter of which year it falls into with other things that are gonna come up as priorities as we look at.
yeah, the community center next year might be aggressive. But
The,
who
the
knows?
lesson for me in all this is I'll be more careful about things that I question, especially in the event they'll come back as a bigger number, proved as a bigger number. So I.
It's always, yes, yeah, nothing's getting cheaper.
The need doesn't go away, the cost only increases.
It guarantees that it will.
Yep. All in favor?
So the land, I want to have a discussion about this because I read the voter approved land acquisition bond that was approved in 2019 last, I believe. And the way I read it, it clearly allows for land for a community center to be an allowable use of those funds. Karen read it the same way. Touch base with Tom today. He reads it the same way. So I don't think we need a specific budget for this because I think we already have an approval in hand. So I would suggest that we remove this line item from the capital budget. Karen made some good points. I just wanted to have that conversation.
Yeah, John brought to my attention that there is the land acquisition bond that was created. But, and I did bring it to our actually rec advisory board meeting and brought it and had a quick conversation with a couple of them. And actually one of the members is on the Land and Conservation Land Board. And I think that was the immediate negative response that I will share is that is also the fund that we are trying to put money into to buy land for open space, to support the 30 by 30. So the only comment that I'm making is this is the same fund that we also, with one of our council goals, we are trying to build that fund up so we can continue to buy more land. With that being said, I understand that you can't always get what you want. And considering I think the school is a good example of it takes time to create a project, get it together. But you also have the flip where if you don't have the land, you can only go so far. So I think a community center is in our future. I'd like to continue to have that aspect, that perspective, but I can appreciate that at the time, we might not be using the money in the land acquisition bond. I can support that, but I think we need to focus on making sure we put more money in the land acquisition bond fund to keep that moving, because again, we circle back to the 30 by 30 goal that we have, and that is a big goal that we have for the next 7 years, and we really need money in that fund.
So let me just explain that a little bit. So it's not really a fund so much as an approval. So we don't have money sitting there, but we have an approval from the voters to go sell bonds if an opportunity comes up. So that's a year off the process because we don't have to go back to the voters if an opportunity does come up. I think we still have 1.4 plus 1
Mhm.
million in the account. Voters have always been very supportive of replenishing it when we need to. Last time it took 10 years to use all of those funds. So I just don't see why we need, it's the same concept. It's money for land. Keep it clean. I just assume use that fund, and if we need to replenish it, replenish it. If there are other opportunities out there, I'm totally game for replenishing it.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of demands and keeping our arms around all of them is a challenge. You know, balancing them and trying to figure out what the priorities will be. So but I think the idea of trying to keep it in a few places rather than us chasing it all over a spreadsheet is probably a good idea. Do you recall when the authority was given for the?
2019, I believe.
Yes.
was-
Yep.
All right.
It's $2.5 million.
Okay.
Approval. And Councilor Calucci is correct. I believe current balance is in the 1.4 range.
We bought Elder Hall. We've approved a
Yeah,
few projects,
yeah.
but we haven't used half of it yet.
Right.
Okay, it sounds like we're general consensus around this. Right? I know it's hard.
I have it.
Thank you, Todd. I promise that we take breaks roughly every hour. So we're gonna recess for 5 minutes and that's enough. And then we'll regroup. Thank you. good detail with the regular presentation as well. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue on with our capital improvement plan review. Moving on to the planning and engineering departments. We covered these in fairly good detail with our operating budget review, but why don't we go through them again for anybody who might be joining us?
Sure. So the first item is the permitting software. And last year we had set aside $32,000 for business licensing software, and the licensing software crossed several departments as well. Clerks, it included marijuana, included food handlers licenses, those sorts of things. But there's a lot of vendors out there that can do multiple modules, if you will. And so we've added to this so that we can get permitting and plan review software as well and incorporate all of the modules into one. And this would allow us really to have, rather than human spreadsheets and alternative locations and institutional knowledge, we would have databases that were capable of reporting information. We could get real-time information on revenues and who has outstanding items. We see that a lot. We'll have conditions of approval, and it's really just, it's on us and our Google calendars to make sure that we can follow up with those things. So that would allow us to run those things through the software. We'd also be able to eliminate paper quite a bit and go online with permitting, and our builders and developers could check the status of their permits online. And so it would really be a very robust opportunity for our department, and we're growing. And this would, I think this would give us an opportunity to skip perhaps in people growth if we can streamline our processes a bit. So we could manage a lot more.
We're going to remember you said that.
I know. I can't believe I just said it. So it's being recorded, Liam.
Yes, it is.
But, so that's what that one is. And then we also have planning office renovations. This is actually being started right now with some money that we had in a prior CIP. This ask is to complete it, so it would finish the front counter renovations. I think that will probably come in a little bit under this. But this would allow us to finish those renovations and get us really up to speed with, I don't know how many of you have been in our department, but it's a very customer facing environment, and it's very small and tight and a bit dated. So this would do that.
We do expect to have a revised estimate. I'm hopeful as soon as in time for your next meeting. And so if we have better numbers, we will certainly bring those to you.
We also have a $15,000 to include with the carryover from a previous year to add a used vehicle. We have 2 Leaf electric vehicles and then a small SUV right now that we share between our 3 code enforcement officers, Brian, zoning administrator being one, planning and engineering services. And so we're requesting to move one of the Leafs into engineering and technical services, and then we would add the $15,000, 6,500 to get another all-wheel drive vehicle for our full-time CEO that does job inspections. The Leaf sometimes is a bit cumbersome on sites. So I think that'd be a pretty good plan, especially as we divided the departments. So those are the 3 that are included. And then we also requested $50,000 for an open space plan, and we requested $100,000 for a vulnerability assessment. And so the open space and conservation plan, that would really let us know where we are in that 30 by 30 goal. It would tell us what we have available, what kind of lands we have, take that inventory, but then also give us the opportunity to see where we could increase that land in the most reasonable and feasible expectations over the next few years, the next 7 years in particular, but would let us look at opportunities for connections and use, and really trying to integrate everything that we have. I was talking to someone today, and their particular neighborhood has about 100 acres of deed restricted HOA land. And this would, while we don't necessarily identify that as open space, it is open space. And maybe there's some opportunity to, we would take an inventory of all that. Maybe there's an opportunity to purchase that or to get the deed restrictions even further. So to incorporate it really into a long-term situation. So that's that open space plan. The vulnerability assessment really takes a look at climate change and sea level rise and what that does to our infrastructure, our streets, our sewers, our water lines, those sorts of things, our coastal properties. It would give us that look at what we can expect with sea level rise and what we need to change to address that. Ordinance changes to increase setbacks that are required, capital improvements.
A question, so but I don't see any numbers with these, so,
They're not in their proposal.
okay,
So the open space and conservation was originally 50,000
Okay.
request, and then vulnerability was 100,000.
okay.
Where do you think those are now?
I think open space and conservation is still around there, maybe a little less, and then vulnerability, I think, is still probably an adequate amount.
Councilor Hamel, I'll take full responsibility. These came forward with a full-throated recommendation from staff. These are the sorts of decisions I make in my proposed budget, so I did not include them, but I made certain to have an exhibit to make sure that there was conversation. I know there's interest.
Yeah, I don't normally ask for numbers to be filled in where they're blank, but it's yours, so I, can't withdraw the question.
We can increase them too.
Yeah,
if you'd like.
Yes.
I think the council has expressed appetite in funding these both through our goals and through the interactions that I've had. And I believe we found funding to do so with some of the actions we've already alluded to tonight. So I would like to recommend that we add these to the capital improvement plans.
There was also additional information that we provided trying to show kind of the comparison. Because I know there was some questions, I think, at the workshop when we talked about open space and how that relates to sea level rise. I think Councilor Hamel brought up. And so we wanted to kind of walk through that a little bit. And so there is a document that talks through that and how one could inform the other. And then they're all larger pieces to the puzzle for our climate adaptation and action plan. So that's where we're kind of taking our steps towards.
So if you would
Trying
just
to
help
lay
me
that out.
get the thread there, I lost the thread there somewhere along the way, so. Not right now, but.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Thanks.
And these might inform future land use decisions.
So Angela's
Exactly.
saying the vulnerability assessment really tells you where you're in trouble, right? But then where you're in trouble might be great opportunities for open space. And so, yeah, let's go say, we know that we need to do something with that. So that's a really simplified, plainer way of saying it.
Autumn, forgive me for putting you on the spot, but I'm aware that Wyndham just did a open space and conservation plan. I'm not familiar with their scope, and are you, and is that a
I know that
comparable
it-
effort?
It was, I would say it was pretty comparable based on what our sustainability coordinator gave us, and they were at the 35 to 40 range. So I feel still confident with our ask.
So there may be some reduction, still getting the product that we expect.
So we plan for 50. If you beat your budget, we're not gonna spend it, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we will. Because these would be appropriate.
Appropriated,
So that would roll into fund balance. If it was.
Okay.
which is not the worst thing in the world.
No.
Everybody good with that
Okay.
recommendation? Okay. Thank you. Ms. Majette.
I did have a question though. You didn't really talk about the master plans here. In the planning department, the phase 1, 2, and 3. Are those, do we charge back those things to developers? I mean, is there any sort of,
So these are a bit different. These are sort of our long-term looks at, we're ongoing with the master transportation plan right now. And so we're really looking at Scarborough on a village approach.
Yep.
And so these village center master plans are our attempt to sort of earmark and get you ready if we have a village approach for traffic improvements and for planning improvements. I'm working with long-range planning right now on 8 corners design standards. And so really trying to look at us the way we really are as these 8 different villages throughout town. So this is just an attempt to say, I think we're going to come back and do a master plan for those.
but
And it
this
would-
is on our tab, right?
This
It's
would
not-
be on our tab,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Angela?
Yeah, I can go over, I know we talked a little bit last time about our Red Brick Watershed Management Plan was actually developed in 2011. We were one of the first few communities that actually did a watershed management plan, and actually I spent the afternoon at a Long Creek Watershed Management Board meeting. It was our annual meeting, and it reminded me as we were walking through the progression, which is just over the line, the next watershed. And there was a studies done in early 2000s, and it was a study on Long Creek and Red Brook together because they're very similar. And it's kind of like looking at kind of the future Red Brook is heading, looking at what Long Creek right now is under an RDA through, which is a action by EPA that requires all the landowners to actually get a permit for their discharging of stormwater. So everyone in Long Creek watershed pays $3,000 per acre towards this plan and how it gets implemented. And that's why Scarborough has 2 members on that board as one of the municipalities. There's a lot of similarities between the two. And so we're trying to keep that moving. At this point, we are just considered an urban impaired stream, which is obviously not a good place to be to start with, but it can be worse. And so what we want to make sure is that we're staying with compliance of our EPA permit, which is saying now that that's so old, our last plan, we need a new roadmap. We've kind of checked off some of those boxes of what we've implemented for projects and working with MTA and DOT and the town. We've even worked on private properties within that watershed to try to improve it. We've kind of done what we could out of that plan, and now it's time to revisit it and come up with a new plan, new strategies. A lot has changed in how we look at stormwater since 2011. So really is a requirement of our EPA permit. So we would have to figure out how to do it some way. I'm proposing to put this in as a CIP so that we can do it justice. And we're working collaboratively with South Portland, who also owns a portion of the watershed. And so that's what this update would give us, a roadmap and a list of projects that then in future years you would see we could be coming back and asking for actually implementation of that. I think we mentioned in the past that we are collecting, there is a revenue stream as developers impact any wetland in that watershed. Typically in most watersheds that in lieu fee goes to the state of Maine. In Red Brook, because we have a plan, it is written actually to the town of Scarborough. We started building that. That includes even projects in South Portland that are in that watershed because we hold the plan because we have the majority of the watershed that comes to us so we can start building and working on projects. So hopefully that will increase somewhat so that we can kind of offset that as that development occurs.
Now, we talked a little bit about this last time, but are you on the board for the Red Brook watershed?
There is no board.
There's
Right
no-
now, it's just an urban
Actually,
impaired
it's the
stream.
board.
I know.
What
I'm trying to pull Autumn in.
Collecting these fees and our plan is so outdated that we don't want to use them, or it would be stupid to use them for
Well,
anything on the plan.
I guess I should clarify. When I use the word plan, it's 2 different things. There is a watershed management plan, which shows projects and here's how we implement. The compensation fee, which is also called the plan, but it's a compensation fee. The revenue that comes in is like a 1-page document that DEP approves. So DEP will say, no, you can't use it for everything. You can use it for this, this, and this.
So it's DEP that we need to yell at?
Well, I need to update that plan that says you need to do this, this, and this, but I don't know what that is until I have a broader look. So that means us looking, collecting water quality sampling and looking at what we're finding along the whole stream and what's actually happening in there for water quality to inform when I go back to DEP and say, I want to use the money for these 5 items out of that plan.
Going to them with funding this study. It's not, I just say, here, we're crossing out everything that's on the list. This is the one thing we need to do now to update our plan. And then we'll come back to you with 5 other things. Do we have $100,000 in the account? Do you know how much is there?
We can't use it for this because it's a permit requirement.
First question I asked. Can't we use the money we collected to do-
Yeah, I asked you.
Our our federal stormwater permit from EPA has certain requirements. One of our requirements, the town of Scarborough, is that we need to update an old watershed management plan. That's Red Brook. And so you cannot use that money for required, it's part of your compliance. It would be like us using it to clean out catch basins, which is also a permit requirement. We can't use that money for that, or buying a back truck. I can't use that money
Two
for
things worth noting in
compliance.
the watershed. One, the large Grandin property, that's about 130 acres. That's land that's ripe for development. It's currently under option. Something is likely to happen there. It'd be great to have a plan and have mitigation projects
Mm.
because fees will undoubtedly be paid. The other one is the Gorham Connector.
Yeah.
Approximately 2/3 of that new roadway sit within this watershed.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for the same reasons, we would love to have a very clear roadmap. Because there are some significant fees coming our way at some point.
Right, so there's certain things that are compliance issues that are, this is what the town has to do. What they want us to do is now be proactive and come up with projects that are above and beyond your compliance issues. That's what that money is for. It's proactive approach or not,
Restoration.
or restoration. Yes, yes.
You got me.
Who knew?
I could talk about that all night, so.
Yeah, I just looked up the Long Creek one. It's all, it involves Westbrook and
Yep.
Portland and South
South
Portland,
Portland, yep.
us, and it's all around the main wall. I mean, it's the last
Yes.
place you think of as.
So
being-
it's that commercial, area, and Red Brook is just, the next watershed over, which is the Payne Road corridor. All of that commercial
Paradise,
entities.
And made a parking lot,
Yes.
big one. They severely damaged Long Creek.
Yeah, we were looking at it today that typically you start to see water quality degradation at 10 to 12% impervious area percentage in the watershed, and that area is at 30 and some subcatchment 60% impervious. So it's pretty significant. And Red Brook is pretty significant impervious cover. So the next one I had is Sawyer Street Spurwink Marsh Restoration Study. This is, we did a joint council workshop with Cape Elizabeth. This is Sawyer Street, which is not to be confused with Sawyer Road, that crosses over the Spurwink Marsh into Cape Elizabeth. That gets inundated and flooded at a regular basis. We did a grant study with Cape, I guess it's been 2 years now, where they looked at, okay, what elevation for sea level rise and everything else, how should we rebuild it? The cost estimates that came in for that small local road were astronomical.
$6 million, as I recall.
So it brought our working group to start considering, well, what would happen if you abandon the street? Which is why that council workshop happened.
Or let return to Mother Nature.
Yes, let it go. And it's not something that, I guess I want to make clear, that hasn't come to a foregone conclusion. It was, let's weigh all the options. We know what it would cost or take to actually rebuild the road. What would it mean if, like you said, we just let it go back to marsh? And so before we make any decisions, or the council could make decisions, it would have all the options in front of them. This is another study. It would be leverage, it would be our match. Cape Elizabeth is also matching with $35,000 to get another $300,000 to actually study what that means and what gets inundated, or because essentially right now it's a dam. What happens, you let out that dam? What does it do to habitat? What does it do to that land and flooding, any of the above, even traffic? We'd have a piece of that study would include a traffic analysis, because that is also probably a commuting road. So it would kind of lay that all out so that the two councils could kind of see all of the options with that. The next two are related to the Downs offsite improvements. And that was based on a council resolution from 2020, 21. That was looking to use our traffic impact fees that have been collected from developers over the years towards some of these offset improvements, the Downs is doing through their TMP, but also kind of catching up from kind of some neglect on using some of the fees to do some of the improvements. This way, piggybacking with the Downs, we get kind of a bigger, better, larger project. So the areas include the Oak Hill intersection is the first one. And the second one is Payne Road Districts 1 and 2, which essentially is from Payne Road from the South Portland line to the intersection of Payne Road and Gorham Road. That would be districts 1 and 2. And
Yeah, I think I've advised, at least, I think I advised the public in one of my manager's reports. We had been in conversation with the Downs and had a meeting scheduled, but it didn't happen with DOT. We're interested in exploring kind of a reshuffling of those projects still within the 5-year TMP timeframe. And there's a number of, I think, legitimate reasons why that makes some sense. So it may be that the projects listed here, this is the sequence that the current TMP calls for. It may be that these projects aren't actually the ones that are going to go in the next construction year. So I wish I had better information for you. But the intent of the prior council action was to commit these funds. These are funds that we have. The DOT essentially has said you must use for these purposes. And we're leveraging private money and other state money to really get a bigger, better project. At least with respect to the Payne Road District 1 and 2, the intention is to close those accounts out and put in place new traffic impact fees that would contemplate new and different improvements. So this is a bit complicated. I know I worked with former Council Chair Clucci on this matter and acknowledged that we needed to at least start with the budget process. I wish I could be clearer about the priority. And we'll know probably something more in a month or so is my guess.
The worst case, you get the approval through this budget to use the funds for that purpose. You may not use them for 2 years instead of.
Right, and if there's other ones, I'll have to come back and secure additional approvals from council to use other funds.
Because you're gonna keep collecting.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So at this point, I say keep these in. Obviously, we're not going to use them if the projects don't go forward. And if there's a reordering of projects and something is needed sooner than we originally thought, we'll have to come back and secure additional approvals from the council.
So these, by their nature, because they're impact fees, they can be only be used for the purpose that they were.
Right.
Designed. So,
Exactly right.
I'm okay. Don?
Yep.
Aaron?
Thank you.
Good job, guys. Thank you. Next up, we have police. This one's a one pager. Feel free to bring a chair up, guys. You guys came fully prepared. Try. So I think several of these will be fairly easy, but why don't you talk us through what exactly sidearm sighting system and holsters? What is that?
Sure. So I have the sidearm sighting system and holsters. So currently we use for our sidearms, it's a Trijicon night sight system. There's some limitations with this, which that is for the officers when they deploy their sidearm, they have to focus on the front sight in order to put it on a threat to them. The new system, which is it's a Trijicon RDS, which is a red dot system, which is essentially it's a holographic dot on the sighting system. That allows the officers to focus on the threat actually, and not focus on the system, on the target themselves. The other advantages for the RDS system is it increases accuracy, it increases speed transition, it increases accuracy at distances, and also on the system, it's an automatic dimming and brightening feature. So when an officer deploys their sidearm, it'll automatically adjust to the lighting conditions. Our firearms instructors have all vetted the system and they've all been trained in it and they highly recommend it.
Sounds high tech. So layman, it goes on the gun, you point it and it'll put a dot basically on, no.
Essentially what it is, it's attached to the sidearm itself.
Okay.
And it's a holographic image, so it doesn't project a dot on a target. That's more of like a laser system. This is just something the officers see while they deployed their sidearm. So it's just a holographic image that they see, and they would place that dot on whatever the threat is or target, so only they would see it.
I learned something new today. That's awesome. Yeah. Utility vehicle replacement. Sorry, any other questions on the? Utility vehicle replacement. Looks like this is a recurring item.
Yes, it is. This has been in the rotation. The replacement program started back in 2002, 2003 budget season. It's an annual request that we make to you folks every year, where we replace one vehicle out of a rotation list that we maintain. These vehicles with that rotation list would be replaced every 5 to 6 years. The funds used for this, in this case, $50,000, is used for the purchase of that vehicle and the setup cost associated with it. These vehicles are multi-purpose vehicles, our evidence technician vehicle, for instance, and transportation of special police equipment and personnel, as well as on occasion, some patrol functions as well.
Okay, so they're not cruisers, they're.
They're not our normal fleet operating line vehicle. Marked units. These are unmarked special function purposes.
Works for me.
Yeah, I have to admit, this is a world I know very little of. I should know more about it, but it does, you know, I've always sort of had the impression that it seems like we, you know, have very aggressive, vehicle. This is a perception, so I can't say that it's valid or bears, any relation to reality, but it just seems to me that we have new vehicles. We have good, relatively late model vehicles. It does seem that we have, very well equipped vehicles. So, and the question I have is, are these fully deployed all the time, or do you use them as a pool, or are they assigned? I mean, so and there are a lot of questions. I don't want to, use up a lot of time going into it. Maybe something I do separately as a, as a task, as a project. But I'd like to get a better understanding of our, the size of our fleet. I just get an impression that we buy the best of the line. We, have the best equipment possible, but it always appears to me that the replacement schedules are really quite aggressive. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about the average use. I know it's a broad question and it's tough for you to answer, but it's a persistent question that I have.
Yeah, I'd like to have this as a subject for a future finance committee. We do have very well established and well documented vehicle replacement schedules across the major departments. And so the question is being posed here to police, but certainly public works is involved, fire department as well.
Exactly right. Tom.
And we really need to have our fleet maintenance folks in here because they're really the engineers of that in terms of recommending when to turn equipment out and vehicles out before they start costing us and while they still have some residual value, frankly.
Do you know how many miles you get to a vehicle?
I don't have the miles in front of me. I can tell you, one of the vehicles in this, I would probably say by the time the 5 to 6 year mark comes up, it's probably around 80 to 90,000. That's what we see in some of our other rotation lists as well, because we have other vehicles that aren't in a capital request rotation, but they still get used a considerable amount of time. These vehicles here, there's a couple assigned to the Detective Bureau, our evidence team, and our special enforcement unit, and they get used fairly frequently.
So this came out of a discussion that Councilor Clucci and I had, and it was really just in an effort to try to get our handle on the whole category of vehicles. So I don't mean this to sound like it's a criticism or we're focusing only on, on public safety or at fire for that matter. We had a similar conversation with the public works folks. It's just a lot of equipment. We'd like to get our heads around this a little bit better so we know, what it could be perfectly fine, but I have no bearing on it. And
One thing I will say, it's a recurring expense and they're already, it's almost like it's in the operating budget.
Yeah.
We're not issuing debt for this. So
Yeah.
that's where I wanted to get to
Yeah.
some of those
Yeah.
things. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to see that.
Thank you. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but
Sorry.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say, just over the course of time, the vehicles that are being used, whether it's police or fire, public works, a lot of thought goes into making sure that we're getting the right vehicle to serve the purpose. For public safety in large part, this is their office, they are spending their entire shift in this vehicle. And so having it perform properly, but also be comfortable and ergonomically correct, all those things are really vitally important. And you're right, we do take pride in buying good equipment, taking care of it. It is the visible part of our organization in many respects, up and down Route 1 and all around town. So that's a philosophy that we have and an investment that we think is wise.
So I'm comfortable. Karen, you're good? Okay. All right, and then we have a big ticket item, the star of the show, the computer aided dispatch and report management software. What is that?
So, kind of a complicated title for it, but, so it's really the core system, software system for all public safety. So police, fire, there's really three parts to it: police, records management, fire and EMS records management. And then the large piece of it is CAD, or computer aided dispatch. So this is the software the dispatchers are using nonstop to take calls, whether emergency, non-emergency, process calls. Status boards tells us where our units are, what they're doing. This request is coming forward late 2021. We were notified by our current vendor that the software product that we purchased back in about 2007, they are no longer providing updates for. Highly problematic for us. Obviously, as you're all well aware, very rapidly changing environment and things happening in public safety and in the growth of our town, with no further increased functionality or developments of the program. That causes a huge problem for us. So we began, the public safety leadership had our needs put out, with the help and direction of the IT department. Certainly a first for me, but going through a really good vetting process of what we wanted, what we need. And highlight this as a priority, not just for dispatch, but for the police and fire departments as well.
Who's the provider? Who's the software provider?
Currently,
Yes.
we contract with a company. It was originally the IMC company out of Massachusetts, but in the 16+ years, it's been, as software companies get sold off, it's now a company called Central Square.
It was IMC, but it's Central Square now.
Correct.
And who's the vendor we're looking to go with?
There's several vendors that we're still in the final vetting process with a couple.
So we don't have a final selection.
We do not have a final selection.
We're very close.
And have you been impressed with their capabilities relative to what we have today?
Overwhelming. I can tell you, going into the, being a dispatcher, you hear about all these different softwares, but going into this process, I didn't know that there was this capability. I'm highly impressed with what was presented to us by several companies. So with whatever company you go with, it's definitely going to improve the capabilities of both police, fire, and dispatch, and really overall mission of providing public safety in the town. We'll be in a better place regardless.
I mean, it's really hard for us to, add any value, or I'll speak for myself, to add any value in terms of what you're recommending here. It's, world I know very little of. So, but I think the point is we want to make sure that we've got the equipment that we need, and it's going to help you to do your jobs and to, perform your duties. At the same time, I want to make sure that we, that this is being fully reflected and somehow captured with impact fees and with cost to serve. And you guys, you're on the front line along with, the fire department and others. And we want to make sure that, our folks that are driving our population and our development are helping us to pay for this.
So Don, that's a good point. This particular item is being paid for by the Downs.
Great.
It's fully funded by the downtown zone, which is probably one of my favorite parts. I love the cool.
So we'll have to thank Peter on each show the next time I see him.
Which is not impact fees, but it is paid for through using TIF funds. Yes.
Great.
I will say that when I was first presented the prospect of needing to replace the system, the budget that we were working with initially was 1.4 million. which obviously is quite a bit different, and really through the efforts of gentlemen sitting here and the IT staff, identifying vendors, working very closely, carefully with them, we've been able to reduce it significantly. And the system that I think we're favoring at this point, I appreciate Joe being a bit circumspect, but we're really getting close to identifying. We're really, I think, getting tremendous value. They see great interest in being in this market. They want us as a partner, and they want it to be successful. And so we're excited about the prospects and think of getting tremendous value. It's hard for me to say that when it's still 825,000. But
Something I'd like to see is after you get it up and running, make another video and show everybody what, the cool technology that we have.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you're doing this, but I think it would be good for us to get an idea of what's the expected useful life and what's the schedule and the cost for upgrades. If this is, if you indicated, is a wildly changing environment, with ownership and technology. So, but it'd be good for us to get an idea of what's ahead.
that's part of the evaluation, understanding what the annual licensing and operating costs are. So we have a pretty good sense in the early years of that.
Good, Karen?
Yeah, I think it's a very appropriate use of the TIF funds.
Good job, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
We'll see you again later if we get through the next two sections. Public Works.
Seems like you guys are just here, right?
Did y'all get a chance to see Steven's video on the catch basin?
More than I ever wanted to know about catch basin. So
An internet sensation.
Now we don't need to talk about it or explain it. We've all watched. the
you ask that
video.
question again, yeah.
Yep, we don't have to do it again.
And
We'll link
apparently,
the video in the minutes.
in my explanation of a catch basin, delighted the engineer. She feels as though she accomplished her job, that she made sure I understand how that works.
So I think we're up to speed on the catch basin truck. I think we all agreed it was a clear need.
Yeah, we went pretty deep.
We did,
Last
we
time.
covered a lot of this stuff. One thing I want to throw out there, and we might have to see how it shakes out next time, is I don't want to keep bonding plow trucks. I'd like to tag that as an appropriation. If we can't make it work this year, we can't make it work, but I'd like to at least float what that might look like on the mill rate. Other than that, what else you guys got? You got a 1 ton excavator. What's the excavator?
So that's one of our larger pieces of equipment. So the excavator is busy for any large projects that we're moving large amounts of earth. So we have an excavator and we have a backhoe that provides similar function. The excavator is just a larger piece of equipment. So when we're maintaining bigger areas, that's what we use. The excavator isn't something that we use on a day-to-day basis, but it is a piece of equipment that when we need it, it's really useful to have it. I think typically most places will keep an excavator for around 10 years, as is 21 years old. So we get a lot of life out of it, but it's a really versatile piece of equipment when we need to use it.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, we're downsizing this one compared to the one that we have now. It would be just a little more versatile for us getting in and around the town and some of the jobs. So it's a little smaller excavator that we're asking for.
Do you trailer it to get it around town, or?
We do, yes.
And is this what, this isn't what pulls the beach rake, right?
No, that's a tractor.
I don't have any issues with the equipment at all. I think we covered it in pretty good depth. You have a clear plan outlined for your replacement schedule.
Councilor Calucci, if it serves you for your next meeting, I can certainly do some quick modeling just to see what the effect of moving that in or funding it by appropriations would be to the tax rate. That's helpful.
I'd like to see it in light of the other things that we've shifted around today.
I'll be prepared.
I don't know if we made enough capacity for it, but I think we may have gotten there. I'll do some math between now and then as well.
Okay.
You have some projects. Big ticket one is Spurwink Road. This is phase 2. Tell me a little bit of, give us a little color on what this project relates to.
Sure, this is piggybacking on phase one, which is out to bid right now, and the bids are closing in another week. So this will be from Pleasant Hill Road to the Cape Elizabeth line as part of phase two. It helps with the sight line of coming out of Sawyer, it's that Streeter Road now, onto 77. It's going to include some bicycle facilities along that corridor as well. And looking at some areas to help with some sea level rise in that area as well.
And do you think, you said your bids are coming back, do you think you have sufficient funding to complete the project here? I know we've had a couple issues with road projects lately.
I'm interested to see what the
You
numbers.
come back to us in the next week, hopefully as well, if you know differently.
Right, well, and this number would be for phase two, which is not out to bid yet. But what's out to bid is phase one currently, so we'll see what that comes in at.
I'm sorry, you said that bid opening is it Friday?
A week from Thursday. I mean,
Yes.
Opens or closes?
the bid closes and we open them.
Good one. Okay, you've got, looks like sidewalk rehab, which I think there's been a lot of interest in. I like that it's appropriated. Where are you planning to tackle with these funds?
We don't have a specific plan right now. It's one thing we're working through right now. I've got several requests from different residents for different areas. We'd certainly be looking at some of our main roads and especially around school systems for the walkability in those areas. So that's something, that's a plan where we're really working to develop a solid plan right now on that.
I was gonna say, next year when we do this, it'd be good to see or be able to show people,
Absolutely.
you know, what might be on the horizon.
Yep,
I think that
absolutely.
would be helpful. Paving, something we do every year. How many miles do we pave a year?
Based on the pricing.
Yeah, it varies a
It
lot.
very varies.
Okay, so we set a budget and depends what the price of
Correct.
pavement is.
And the budget was, as I recall, was set on, based on maintaining a PCI, a specific PCI value of the roads, based on some numbers that the software program that we were using had spit out for us.
Yeah, we did, Stephen, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, do a complete townwide pavement survey. So we have all the roads kind of ranked, if you will. And these monies, including our paving monies, are really based on that and doing a certain percentage of those roads. The theory is let's keep good roads good before, rather than let them go and needing full reconstruction. And that can be a real challenge. Some of our roads are on a 20-year rotation, probably most are for paving at this point.
Yeah, depending on usage, yeah.
Yeah, and that's another plan we're working on right now. We've gone out a couple of years now. We're looking to get out, I'm looking to go out 20 years, but with the first 5 being pretty set in stone of what we're going to do. So that way we can be, you know, working ahead of the paving schedule on those particular streets, if it's sidewalk work, tree work or something like that, ditching that we might have to happen. So we can get out ahead of that and be ready for the paving the next year.
We also use these funds to leverage additional state and federal monies, tax, the local transportation group funds a fair amount of paving. In fact, I was talking with Councilor Hamel. There's a project on East Grand Avenue that will go from Scarborough all the way into Old Orchard. I'm not sure how far, but it's a PAX funded project. There's a local match requirement. The bids came in quite a bit higher than estimates. And we were able to just this week secure additional PAX funding. And so those projects thankfully will be going forward this year.
You feel like we're setting aside enough funding for maintenance where we'll get through all the roads that need to be hit in 20 years? Or do we anticipate a kind of a bubble or?
I would anticipate some increases in that number over the years, just based on the increase in cost to do the work. So I would definitely be looking at some increases over the next several years.
But these budget amounts were intended to keep us up. As
Right.
costs increase, I think we're able to do less mileage, frankly.
What's PCR value? You mentioned that.
PCI, it's a
PCI.
pavement condition index.
Okay.
And when the survey takes into effect drainage, different cracking, potholing, that kind of thing, and there's, it'll spit out a number of a pavement condition index. And that can be anywhere from 0 to 100. We're looking to try to maintain around 75, I believe, Steve. which is kind of in the middle of the road. So if you get, once you start getting below 75 or even get below 60, your road's really starting to fall apart, might need more reconstruction. Where if you can keep it at 75 in that area, it would be more of maintenance than a reconstruction of the road.
Give a feel for when most of the subdivisions in town came online. I feel like they're all, it was 20 years ago, wasn't it?
There's a lot from
Around there. Okay.
Yeah.
So we may be in the midst of the worst of it right now.
Correct. It could be.
Good. Any other questions?
I had two questions that may go way off the reservation here, but one is, and this may be more for the town manager than for you guys, but have we ever entertained, asking developers to purchase a piece of equipment, or for example, if we have to get different snow plows because we have narrower roads in certain developments, and Eastern Village is always one, maybe part of the Downs. Would they ever entertain, or would we ever entertain asking them to buy a piece of equipment for the town to use to do that?
We haven't, but we have, in view of the fact that we have some different demands, smaller streets, tighter turning radius, so on and so forth. We have started to transition, not all of our fleets certainly, but some of them. So one conventional plow truck essentially is buying us two smaller trucks with the appropriate gear. So no, we've not gone directly to make that ask, but we certainly are anticipating what the new demands are, and it's not necessarily costing us more money. It's just anticipating that and getting the equipment that we need.
And I think you guys do a terrific job. So this next question may, also be farther out of scope than the last one that I asked, but it has to do with this issue of along the lines of gifting. You guys, for example, do a lot of electrical work, right? And we do things for other towns. We touched on that the last time you spoke. Would we ever, this is an operational question, Tom, for you, but I know in a lot of the other reviews we had, people are talking about maintaining, greens, cutting grass, maintaining, doing the mowing for the town. And I understand you guys do that now for certain roadways, right? You cut along.
We do the roadside
roads.
mowing, yes.
Would we ever consider having Public Works do all of that for the town instead of having each group, the school, community services, go through the whole process of trying to figure that out separately? And I know this is.
Yeah, there's a
way out
lot
of
to that.
scope, but
To that question. No, I think that actually having a parks division, having community services handle kind of the grass cutting, if you will. The roadside mowing is really a tractor with a fairly rough, radial arm. So it's just knocking down the big weeds. It's not kind of manicuring an area. So
Yeah, we don't own any of your typical ride-on lawnmowers that you would see community services using.
anyway, I'm impressed by how efficient you guys are and how well you perform a wide range of services. It just occurred to me, if we had ever, if that ever thought would be worth some discussion.
one thing that might be helpful, the Downs is a great example. They are doing some unique things with on-street parking. They have some, esplanades and ornate landscaping and such. We've been very careful in terms of working out arrangements and agreements that they maintain those through their HOAs and such, so that we're certainly providing the basic maintenance on the straight run, but we're not deviating off into these parking areas. And so that's really changed our thinking. That's not normal. Usually you give us the right of way, we take care of what's in the middle of it. Eastern Village is another example. They choose to build sidewalks on both sides. We plow the street, but their HOA takes care of the sidewalks. So we're trying to be sensitive to kind of the unique demands put on us and trying to put them back on the private interest.
Thanks. Thanks for indulging my diversion there.
That's a good question.
So I don't have any other questions. I'm totally comfortable here. I do have one outstanding item that I'm trying to understand, and that relates to parts and gas. You have a revenue item in your budget that comes from other departments. I'd like to just see that broken down by department. What comes from the school department versus police, fire, and whatnot.
I think it already is for the revenue side.
Yeah.
I think it's just an aggregate revenue line. I know you've got the detail to support.
Yeah, we do have the details. to-
Yeah, I just don't have it.
Absolutely.
I would just like to see it.
Okay, yep.
Thank you. Good job, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
And we're at 7:05, but I want to try to do the school department because I think it'll be pretty fast, and then we'll take a quick break. Run up, Kate. Thank you for coming.
We haven't seen you in ages.
I know, I feel like I never see you guys. And I apologize, I wasn't sure that there was going to be a full-on review because I sort of felt like we did that, but we didn't get really deep into capital. So I did want to be here and talk about questions, but how do you want me to tackle it? Do you want me to just run through like other folks have been doing, or what's good for you?
I think that works for me. I can tell you that the top of the list is the school bus replacement schedule. And we've talked about, it's planned to be bonded.
Yeah.
And I think everybody knows what it is. You buy three buses every year?
3 buses every year. We have a fleet of 30 and their recommended replacement cycle is every 10 years. Based on mileage, you know, we're a huge town. They're driving thousands and thousands of miles every year, and based on insurance as well, because it's very difficult to get insured for replacement costs on a school bus after it's gone over 10 years. So, you know, if you, God forbid, have an accident, then you're going to lose the value of that vehicle. So there are 2 good factors there. But you start with a good point, which is kind of what I've been thinking about is more on the funding side of things than the projects, because I think most of our projects will look really familiar to you.
We have them every year.
One of the things that the town manager has worked really hard to do with school and with town finance is to appropriate funds for those ongoing year after year replacements and renovations. So when you look at our budget and you see all of those A's in there, most of those things are already in a cycle where we expect them to be repeated year over year. And so we've made the effort to not to move them into operating because they are capital expenses, but to fund them with tax dollars. So I think that, you know, the pressure points, John, for you might be around what's expected to be bonded. And then we also have the capital reserve fund. For those who haven't followed school finance into the deep weeds, we had, which you did, I know. We had $600,000, mostly from excess general purpose aid that came from the Department of Education in last year's budget, in the FY22 budget. And we added a little bit of surplus that we had generated during the course of the fiscal year with budget over expenses. And the school department created a specific capital reserve fund for school projects or school equipment. And it's basically, it's available to us through the rules of state statute and the Department of Education to fund pretty much anything that's in our capital budget. There are a few parameters, but really most of anything that we would put into our capital budget, we would be able to use those funds for. So in the current year, FY23, we're using $199,000 of that original 600,000, which leaves us with 400,000 401 in the bank.
There's none coming into this budget.
There has not been anything that we've put forward in this budget from that fund. That at the beginning of our thoughts in developing FY24 budget was really because we have the building project coming on board.
Mhm.
And thinking in terms of, okay, it would be kind of cool to have at least a little bit of school capital reserve money that might be able to offset some of those expenses. But with that said, there's no reason why we couldn't use those reserve funds to fund something in this budget up to and including $400,000. And I will also say that the board is really committed to continuing to fund that year over year. And there is definitely going to be that tension or balance between maintaining a healthy fund balance On the school department side, this year and last year, or this year and FY '24, we've used $1.5 million of that general fund surplus as revenue. So that's going right back to the taxpayers and lowering our tax ask. It's also as fund balance that's available to the town to make our fiscal health look better.
So one thing I think you nailed it there. And what I would like to do is, instead of bonding for the school buses, use the school department capital reserve fund to pay for those, but then also encourage the school department, when you do your year-end tallies, to replenish that fund before you give it back as a revenue item in the budget. I think that's a way to kind of stair step towards not issuing bonds for recurring items. Is that confusing?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of saving money, you know, saving the value of a bus, you know, every year.
Yeah, you're not gonna pay the interest then.
You know, I know we've fallen into this practice of doing things, and there is another way to do it. You know, it's a little bit old school. It's a little bit buy something when you have the cash, you know, and don't pay for the cash. And we know the price of cash, the price of credit is going up, and the last thing we need is another credit card as a town. So, you know, just saying.
So I guess as the fiscal conservative that you all know me to be, I'm not sure that I would take all 3 buses and pay for them in the first year. Because we don't have enough to actually buy 3 buses. We're just a little bit short. Not that we wouldn't be able to come up.
How's your surplus trending this year, though?
Surplus this year is trending very well. And we have 2 million in the bank at the end of FY '22. But we're spending that in FY '24.
5-year spending.
1.5. So we're not in a bad place. We're not in a bad place, but I'm a little,
I don't mind a little pushback.
a little cranky. So yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly where the school board finance committee has been going. Let's, and to Dawn's point, when we had our meeting together with the school department, we were talking about vehicles and we were talking about buses and like, what better use? Because each year you're going to be having that expense. We should either be moving toward having it be appropriated because again, it is a recurring expense like the other vehicles, or having those bonded or those reserve funds available to use for that purpose. So we're definitely on board with the philosophy. Whether we use every last dollar in FY '24 makes me a little anxious, but
You could phase it in over time and start doing it step by step.
we definitely give you a bus or two.
But we only have one line item here. So it's easier to just change the D to an R.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But we've also funded things with different funding sources too. I know how to put things on 2 lines.
Yeah, and that's, we can look at that.
Would we, if we ended up, and the reason I hesitate too, John, is because for a long time, our buses have been really steady on pricing. And the last 2 years, they've just gone cuckoo. So if we had the authority to spend this guesstimate, which is pretty decent, I hope, but it ended up going over, what we would end up doing would be pulling funds from somewhere else to pay the difference. So maybe if we could talk about that a little bit, if.
It pinches things.
Yeah, it does.
I understand that. And then the concept of 2 buses versus 3, it's not lost to me. I'm not totally opposed. It's just, how do you ever start that transition, right? We've been trying to do this forever. And I just keep looking at, well, you're giving us $1.5 million back every year. Spend it on this and let's try to normalize it. And that's a way to stair step.
Right. So who was it who said, is this being recorded? So next year, when we have less money
To give back.
Yeah. And it probably won't be next year. I think next year is going to be good. And I think we're going to try to build a little bit more into the reserve so that we keep that going. But, in ensuing years, it may be that becomes appropriated.
It may move to that. Yeah, it could, because you're not.
Because we're not building sufficient surplus to
Correct.
build that reserve fund over time if we deplete it each year. Right. So like I said, it's a balance thing.
Yeah, I mean, if the existing reserve, which is 400, is allocated or directed toward offsetting these expenses, I understand that may not be quite enough. But you could
We
certainly
can make up the difference. We
you
can
could
make up the
make up the difference, or we would hope you'd replenish that capital reserve with your own fund balance.
Well, so that's
Exactly.
not to debate, but that's the difference between the authority to spend and the funding source, right? Because if we say that it's coming, that we have authority to spend $405,783 and it's 406, then we would normally make up the difference out of our operating budget.
Yeah, so if we're funding it through
Regardless
the
of the
capital
funding
reserve, you have the authority to spend it. If, Tom and I were talking about this a little bit, if it's funded through bonds, you get that authority when we actually authorize the bond issuance.
Right, right.
And right now, that happens after we've already spent the money, which is that's something else we're trying to,
It's another step.
yeah.
Yeah, and so as I said, I think the intent of, I know that the intent of the school board finance committee is to be able to take as much surplus as we feel we can safely afford at the end of this year and dump it into that reserve fund now that we have it. And they're committed to adding to it year over year. It's just a question of how much.
Okay, there is an acknowledgement, and I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you when you only have $1 million or something less in fund balance.
It is gonna step down. We know that's.
To start off FY 25. I mean, we appreciate that's the consequence of this.
Right. Use it one way and don't use it another. But to your point, John, I think it's really your point. 2 points. One is, why would you pay interest if you don't have to? And then secondly, if you're saving the money anyway and using it to lower the tax rate, then why not use it to make a purchase? that
Which is
lowers the
ultimately
future
going to
tax
lower the
rate,
tax rate.
The future tax rate
Yeah.
on the borrowing rate. Same purpose.
So we're gonna, at our next meeting, we're gonna have a list.
Right.
Of what we've talked about today. I would like to include this, using the capital reserve cities on that list. And then we're gonna have to make some decisions. It might not all, we might not be able to do it all. Basically, or there might be opportunity for some other things that we come up with. I'm seeing nods. I think we're okay. And I think it's, I don't think it's overly aggressive. I understand it might be a little uncomfortable, but I took the plow truck. I have to take the school buses.
Oh, my God. Okay. I'll take it like a man.
And we're not gonna do the school building project any justice today, so I don't think we need to go there.
Were there other things that you wanted to talk through? Or there were questions about?
I mean, personally, I'm very familiar with your capital plan and I like it. In that you have categories and these are the things that you need to budget for in capital items every year. And stuff carries over, right? So sometimes you're building a balance that you can take on a bigger project in the future. I think that's the way a lot of this stuff should happen. So.
Well, and it is mapped out with some pretty good backup. And I've heard some of my colleagues here talking about, there is a replacement cycle for most of these things. And we're following that. And we're also responding to actual conditions on the ground, like the folks are saying. But there's some flexibility within the 5-year plan to be able to get all those things done.
He seems to take pretty good care of your facilities and equipment.
That's not my job, but thank goodness. We
Well,
have
it starts
great
with you,
people
Kate.
to do it. I put it on the budget and Todd takes care of everything.
You guys have any questions on the school capital? Nope.
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, I think they went through this thoroughly already, so I don't really have any.
Maybe twice.
Yeah, I do share the anxiety of wiping out a whole account for 3 buses. And I'll
But you
express
guys
that.
can talk.
Yep, we will.
We'll make it work.
Okay.
How much was the plow truck?
249,000, I think.
Oh,
This is
really?
not-
Oh, really?
There are other items, so I got a list here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, that concludes our capital improvement plan review. We're not too far off schedule, but I am gonna take a 5-minute break. And then we'll regroup for the fire and police and EMS. Right, we're going to continue on with our review. It's now about 7:25, and we're going to move on to the police department. And we have Chief Holmquist here with us, and his team. Take it away.
Thank you, sir. Before I begin tonight, I just want to thank our staff. To my right, Deputy Chief David Grover, in the back, and the gentleman who presented earlier, the CIP requests, Lieutenant Tim Barker, Lieutenant Scott Vaughn, and Dispatch Manager Joe Thornton. Did an excellent job tonight briefing. And then I don't want to forget the glue that keeps us all together, our Administrative Assistant Kathy Chandler. All of these folks have put in a lot of hard work in this budget process, as always, and they've done a lot of careful review for us to come forward with a we feel a responsible budget request tonight. We come to you with a 4% budget increase for FY24, and a lot of it is involving staffing. As you know, last year we were granted 2 additional sworn positions, which we were thankful for, to keep up and keep pace with the growth in our community and the responsibilities that we have as a department. Currently, we have 42 sworn positions authorized, and we have 3 vacancies. We're requesting 2 additional sworn officer positions to meet the increased demand for those services. And the stat that I just can't get away from, that will grow and grow as we go on. 11 officers are currently retirement eligible. The key number here is 6 of those officers have a lot of time with us, between 30 and 35 years. So we're on, as I recognize, we're on limited time with those officers. They put in a great number of years for our community, full careers, and but I do know that the time is coming when some of those officers will start retiring.
How big of a staff do you have?
We have, well, currently we have 42 authorized positions and 39 currently on.
25% of your staff is due to retire.
The budget drivers. We did see a slight increase of calls per service last year compared to our 3-year average. As you all know and are aware, substance use disorder as well as mental health calls for service take up a lot of our time. In the budget packet that I submitted, the read ahead packet, I took the time to just highlight some of the key calls for service, the categories that we see. Not in all cases, but in most cases, are attributed to either mental health issues or substance use issues. Took a look at the breakdown of 2022 calls in comparison to the 3-year average and then the average time on scene. Our officers do a great job in triaging the calls for service that they do go on. And once they get on scene, they have to make a quick evaluation as far as scene safety, trying to figure out what's going on, the root causes, whether it's mental health, substance use, or other things that they might be faced with, and then to take the appropriate enforcement action. All doing that before getting called to go somewhere else for another priority call. So that's the balance that our patrol officers and the challenge, frankly, that they face each and every calls for service. They know that their time is limited when they're on scene, and the next call that they go to may take one officer away from that call for service, or both officers. When you're running with the staff, most nights of 1 supervisor and 2 patrol officers, it can get very busy out there, given the time of day.
The chief's referring to Exhibit 1 under tab 6, page 49, if you want to know more about the distribution of calls and kind of the demands that each of them bring.
Our patrol staffing levels, we feel, are not sufficient given the demands today within our community. We're using a patrol model that we've had for approximately 30 years. The minimum staffing of 1 supervisor to 2 officers. That's what we have as minimum staffing. On a good day, we have one supervisor and 3 officers on the road. Currently, we have 17 patrol officers assigned with 5 patrol supervisors. You look at our overall numbers is, 42 authorized positions and 39 currently in our ranks. We do have additional responsibilities that we've highlighted throughout the years in the last 30 years or so. Our community involvement, that's an important piece. SROs certainly are important to our schools, our detective bureau, our special enforcement team, and on and on and on. ACO, MRO, those are things that we just can't move away from at this point. Our community is used to that level of service, and frankly, they deserve the highest level of service that we can provide. So simply taking 3 detectives and putting them back in patrol, that's not a call I'm willing to make, because we're going to drop off in other areas of our response to our community and our service.
Do you benchmark our staffing levels relative to population against other communities?
Yes, I do have some stats for you.
I wasn't expecting.
For towns with approximately 22,000 in their population, you're looking at Brunswick, obviously Scarborough and Biddeford. So Brunswick PD has 54 square miles that they cover, and they currently have 38 police officers. Biddeford has 56 officers to cover 59 square miles. So those are the towns and cities within southern Maine that we've used for comparison purposes. I'm just going to mention now, since it's been brought up, that in 2017, the FBI came up with a standard for the rate of sworn officers per capita, and that rate was 2.4 officers per 1,000 people. So given that ratio, we should have approximately 53 police officers in it. It appears that Biddeford, is a little bit above that, but they do have a greater, square mileage area to cover. So that's just a benchmark. They're, looking at police officers and departments throughout our state. Very few that can reach that standard, just given all the other things that come with staffing. As you know, staffing in public safety has been difficult for us all, regardless of department.
Chief, if you don't mind, I'd just like to interrupt for a moment. So I don't forget the question, but you mentioned the other towns that you used as benchmarks, Brunswick and also Biddeford. And you did them mainly because of the population was the main driver. So is there a socioeconomic sort of factor that enters in there in terms of, what the situation might be in terms of the issues that are faced, among our 3 towns? I mean, in other words, can we assume that, well, maybe socioeconomically we are, a wealthier town, does that mean we have fewer police calls? I mean, is there any sort of rule of thumb like that, or is it just totally different town by town?
I think it's different town by town. Certainly Biddeford has different challenges than Brunswick and Scarborough. I look at, when we look to grow our department, we're looking at the increases in calls for service for mental health, substance use, as well as traffic. Our patrol officers stopped approximately 8,000 vehicles last year. I just think about how much more they could do traffic enforcement wise, and that was a priority in the 2021 survey, how much more traffic enforcement they could do if we had greater numbers in our ranks. So
thank you. Thanks. That's really helpful.
It's one of our priorities moving forward. To get back to budget drivers, the inflation costs, as you've heard from each department head, is consistent across the board. Department. And then another thing that we're bringing forward to you tonight is increased time required to prepare digital evidence for court. In the request for our 2 additional officers, we'd like to take within our current ranks, we'd like to take and designate one of those positions to digital evidence, a digital evidence technician. And the reason for that is we have the Cumberland County District Attorney's Office uses a system called ShareFile. ShareFile is not unique to Cumberland County. It's used in every prosecutorial district throughout the state. It's essentially something that makes the prosecution of cases a lot more efficient, paperless as well. But on the downside of that, it does increase the workload for the staff, our staff here at Scarborough PD, and other PDs around the state. The increased time, you're looking at our detective sergeant who already has is carrying a caseload as well as supervising 3 detectives, is devoting an abundance of time each week to trying to make sure that the discovery goes out in a timely manner. Not only timely, but it's correct and accurate before we send it out the door. So you have our detective sergeant, you have our evidence technician, as well as administrative staff trying to piece together a product with our names on it, frankly, that goes out the door in a professional manner. And it takes approximately 48 hours per month for staff to do that. So we'd like to designate this digital evidence technician to not only do some of that, but also to properly collect the digital evidence, being able to safeguard that evidence and preserve it, not only for discovery, but also for future use in cases that don't get prosecuted. Another priority with the digital evidence technician is to do some research on something that we'll be requesting next budget season, and that's a body worn camera and in-car cameras. Something that's long overdue here in Scarborough. We had in-car cameras many years back, but those went away. But we need to get up to date with some of the footage that could be provided not only to courts, but also to protect our officers in any type of circumstance where there's personnel complaints. Given my previous employment, I've seen where in-car cameras as well as body worn cameras can quickly resolve a personnel issue as soon as you mention the word, footage. We have footage for this. So it's something that this digital technician will be able to highlight which products we should be looking at for purchase, and to be able to work with IT and other stakeholders to implement.
Just imagine the volumes of video footage and potentially evidence that we'll be producing with both body worn and in
I'm
camera.
curious how you did it before, because you would think that going digital, because I work at a law firm, it's supposed to make it easier. In my world, we went digital and it's made my job more efficient and more easy.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to make the connection between now everything's digital. We're not printing it out. We're not mailing stuff. We're not burning discs. We're not transferring stuff, to how it is more time consuming now than it is in the old practice.
In the past, what we would do with discovery, the reports that needed to go into the district attorney's offices, they would go in by paper. With the current system that they have, it doesn't integrate with our record management system. So that the documents actually have to be downloaded into a electronic format and then uploaded back into the ShareFile product. And then the DA's office at this point is asking for each of the sections of the reports to be put into subfolders as opposed to just one file with the complete document. So the person that's responsible for doing that is doing it, is not able to just take one electronic copy of a report and transfer it into another system in the way that it might work. And then the digital evidence that we're already dealing with just in our new facility with the cameras that are on the outside of the building as well as inside of the building. If somebody is involved in a situation where they come through the lobby and go through the building, if the officer drives around the building with a prisoner, all of that digital evidence needs to be supplied to the DA's office at the time that the reports are submitted. So even without the body worn cameras and cruiser cameras at this point, there's a lot of digital evidence that we need to provide.
So if this evidence exists, we must provide it through the discovery process.
Driving around the building, you have to provide that?
If the officers brings a prisoner into the booking area that we have in the building with the challenges that the sheriff's department and the jails have had with staffing, we've done more than we have in the past with having prisoners processed through the station. But there are cameras on the exterior of the building. So those cameras, any footage of the vehicle, the cruiser driving in and on the outside of the building need to be provided as part of the discovery that goes into court.
Sounds overwhelming.
And again, I'm a huge supporter of body worn and in-car cameras, but just appreciate the hours and hours of footage produced every day that doesn't exist today, that we need to manage, maintain, produce. So there's a whole nother level of effort and cost associated with managing all that data.
So our request is to have this position authorized and in place so that we're not faced with, coming back next year and asking for this position and then body worn cameras following shortly thereafter. It would make sense to have this person in position, trained and ready.
This is a position that other towns typically have.
Starting to see some of the bigger municipalities devote assets to positions like
Right.
this.
I would imagine as the courts start to go that direction, that'll be more prevalent.
Right. If we switch to economic realities, hiring challenges continue to be an issue within not only the police, but also all of public safety. And if you talk to any police chief or leader within any government within the state of Maine and regionally, hiring is tough right now. And we were afforded the 2 extra positions last budget season, which we appreciate. But that followed by 3 retirements, July and August. And then we do have 1 retirement pending this coming next month, actually. So that's the constant flow of the turnover within public safety. So we've done a great job, and I thank Liam and his staff as well as our staff to be able to not only publicize these vacancies, and I think we've reached a broad audience. We've had some really good candidates come through, and just a few that have been hired. Only 4 have been hired since last July, but all of us can come to you with a straight face and say that we've done our best to vet these folks and that they fit right in with the quality officers that we do have within our ranks that the town of Scarborough has grown accustomed to. So we will not lower our standards when it comes to hiring, and we want to make sure that we have the right people wearing our uniform. So having said that, the hiring challenges continue. We have been able to hire 4 folks, but we do have the 1 pending retirement, and we have 2 officers who have decided to go on to other agencies, not because of not preferring to work for Scarborough PD, but life circumstances have happened. They've had to move a little further away and have young families, and that extended travel time is just not worth it for them anymore. So those are all things that we have to face each and every day when we try to recruit. We have been able to expedite our hiring process. Again, the quality that we're getting, there's no loss in quality, but we've had to take and open up a process, say for 2 weeks. And if we get a candidate that appears to be good on paper, within the first couple of days, we're contacting that candidate right off to make sure that we can get them in for an interview. Because in most instances, we've seen that if we go out and contact that person within 2 days of them submitting an application, they already have 2 other applications out somewhere else, and they could be well within the hiring process for another agency. So it really is a race to get good quality folks. Other departments are offering incentives, whether it be recruiting incentives or hiring incentives. We've chosen not to throw money at candidates coming in. We want them to come here for the right reasons. The whole package of what Scarborough PD and the town of Scarborough can offer is what we have to offer to them. So that'll cover the hiring challenges. The other economic reality is just the salary increases, which I feel have been able to get us up into within striking distance of the top few agencies who have recently increased their payroll, probably from years of not increasing, doing percentage increases. For instance, Old Town and Lewiston have just had substantial pay raises, and the other agencies that have always been in the top 5, top 10 are trying to catch up with that because it is a competitive market. We need to stay relative to folks that are considering a career in law enforcement or those existing officers who are looking to change agencies. And then the last economic reality is just the inflation costs for supplies, training, and equipment across the board. That's gone up. Just about everything that we purchase has gone up considerably. The alignment with council goals. We are so fortunate to have Lauren Dembski Martin, our social services navigator. So housing choice and homelessness is how we'll align with council goals. We're going to continue to support Lauren and everything that she does by providing her the time and the resources she needs to do her job. We'll strategize with stakeholders to implement solutions based on the needs analysis, and the Cumberland County Community Block Grant has been awarded. Approximately $12,000 has been awarded to us to take a look at this study for the unhoused population as well as housing assessment, and then to come up with some policy creation and implementation. And then mentoring of the proposed social services coordinator position, which we fully support. And it's to have Lauren be tasked with the mentor and the supervisor for this proposed position just makes sense. She is, if you haven't met her, please take the time to meet her at some point. She's very gifted at what she does, and I think that she'll be able to provide great benefit to the person coming. And then one thing that wasn't mentioned on the slide, but I think that we provide feedback quite often is traffic and transportation. So we'll continue to be a participating stakeholder in meetings regarding traffic study and planning.
Thank you, Chief. That was very good. I guess I'll start with a question. So it struck me how many officers you have near retirement. Do you have an inkling for how many may choose to pursue retirement next year?
As of right now, just one. Yeah, sometimes it's not a question that I like to ask because I don't want people to think that I'm trying to force them out the door. I'm not. Truly, I'm thankful that they continue to come to work for us and do a good job. But our staff is really good. They understand what we're up against for personnel, and with all these pending retirements, they've told me to a person that they'll give us good advance notice. Our upcoming retirement of Rob Pellerin, our SRO at the middle school, he gave us 6 months or so in advance notice. So that's just the common courtesy that our officers have provided to us. There's been only one retirement in the last year that's been kind of unexpected and short notice, but otherwise every other retirement has been well in advance.
It seems that you have fairly good retention. I mean, if you don't talk about the regular retirements, you've only had a couple of people that have left. I mean, is that probably not typical of other departments, I would imagine.
Right, and we've taken a look at some folks that have been in other departments and wanted to come to our department, and if they have multiple stops in a short career, that's not an officer that we're interested in, because that will continue. So we're lucky, we're fortunate that we have officers, once they get here and get within our ranks, and they see how Scarborough PD runs, and the community support that we have that's one thing that when I sit down with these candidates during the chief's interview, I reiterate to them the type of community support that we have here in Scarborough is unlike anything you'll ever see. And that goes a long way, especially this day and age. So I think once we get them here, get them within our ranks, they're impressed, and they know that they're well taken care of, both, through salary and benefits, as well as support from the town council and from the town.
Good.
I don't have any specific questions. One of the questions that I asked every department at the end, but I feel like you've already answered this, is do you feel like your department is big enough to support a town with a population, as we've recently learned, is over 23,000?
No, and it'll be a consistent ask for us each year. It'll be justified, I feel, to come forward each year with continual request for personnel. I just think that, the pending retirements alone, we have to look at our growing community, and we have to look at, do we meet the needs of the community? We've already identified one priority through traffic enforcement that we'd like to capitalize on. And that's just one priority among many priorities within our police agency, as far as what we want to do within our town over the next 5 to 10 years.
Do you feel like the salaries are competitive? And that's not a contributing factor. Do you feel like when you're losing candidates, do you feel like it's because of, I understood that they're getting signing bonus, but take away those bonuses, are the salaries competitive?
I feel like we are competitive, very competitive, and we always have been. And but all it takes is one or two departments to go, $2 to $3 more in their starting pay, and then you see a flock of officers leave one agency that they've been with for many, many years and go with another. So I think that the salary is really driving some of this. We've had in our hires, the 4 hires that we brought on this year, money hasn't necessarily been the deciding factor. It's everything else. So we're very thankful for the folks that we've hired this year, and we hope to continue upon that next year.
Thank you.
I think you said it well. Money is just one factor. It's probably not the driving factor for a lot of the people that you want to work for you. I find that in my business as well. Practically speaking, you've beat your budget the past couple of years on wages and benefits substantially. Given what's happening, you're probably going to beat it again. I'm not looking to touch your budget. I think it's fine, but I think it's good to know. I think it's probably a conservative budget this year, given the transitions that you're going to be experiencing. So that's just good for us to have in the back of the mind. If you don't spend it, it'll be there for future years.
A quick question, I should know the answer to this before I ask it, but your patrol staff, your frontline folks they're in a bargaining unit?
They're in a what?
Yeah, they're covered by collective bargaining agreement. So at least in terms of the economics for that, you don't feel you're limited, or in terms of the economics that you offer?
Well, it's obviously we're up for negotiation next year on the contract, and both unions, both dispatch as well as patrol, come to us quite often to talk about ways that we can gain advantages over other agencies. For recruiting, but also for retention of our great employees that we have. So it's a constant conversation. Liam has been very patient, has worked very hard to try to meet not only administration needs and the town's needs, but also the needs of the unions.
That's good to know. We just want to make sure that you would have my support. I work with Liam on this, and we'll do what we can to make sure that that you have what you need in terms of economics. And we realize that's subject to a process. It did occur to me that you mentioned, it seems like you have a fairly good success in terms of attracting candidates, but and there are non-economic aspects to that. I just, would encourage you to give us ideas for where you might need help in that area in terms of attracting and closing candidates. So whatever you think that might be. I just have one, I think in general, I'm fine with your budget and, your, how you run your department and many good things about the way that, this service is performed in the town. I think we're very lucky, but it's not luck, it's hard work, and it's commitment that delivers that. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
I did notice one blip in your pension line where you're up by $90,000 on it. I think if I'm reading that correctly. Is that, or my? That's your proposed positions, but there was a pension line here that I thought your pension is up by something like 12%. Is that, do you know why that is? Why there was such a blip like that?
I believe it might be 12% is the medical insurance.
Sorry, right.
So that's likely a combination of an increase in the premium as well as just changes in what the sample has for an enrollment. So someone who moved from a single policy to a family policy or other sort of vacillations over the year.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you. Otherwise, I mean, budget at 3.2%. I mean, that's good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. And last, certainly not least, we have fire EMS. Thank you guys for sticking with it for 3+ hours. Most of them, all of these guys showed up at least 20 minutes early.
That's right.
We've had a preview of this, haven't we? Haven't we done this in front of the council, referred to staff, upcoming staff changes or not? Am I just reflecting on last year?
We have.
Seems like
I
we were
think
just
it's last year.
Okay.
Thank you for having us tonight, and I'd like to start. First of all, I want to offer regrets from Deputy Chief Kevin Duras. He's down in Maryland at the National Fire Academy, finishing some of his executive series training. He's down there for the week, so it's a free class that's offered to firefighters across the country, and he went and took part in that this week. So he sends his regrets that he wasn't able to be with us. But I am very pleased to introduce you to Deputy Chief Ian Tenney, Deputy Chief John Brennan. As some of you may know, when I took over, one of my first tasks was I had to rebuild my entire senior staff from the ground up. And this community is completely fortunate to have been able to source and hire the 3 people that are here to help me run this department and make the changes that are needed to run this department. So we're very fortunate in that aspect. I specifically am very fortunate. So starting off, just the overview, as some of you may or may not know, the department manages several divisions. We manage the fire suppression division, which means we respond and put out fires. Emergency medical services, which, as we talked about earlier, is probably the key component of what we provide for service here at 80%. Fire inspections and preventions and plans reviews are done. And emergency management is one of our roles that we take on it's kind of a secondary role. It doesn't take a ton of time, but it does in certain parts of the season. We are quite busier than others. We operate with 3 classifications of employees. We have full-time members. We have per diem or part-time members, or they used to be referred to as day firefighters. And we still have a fairly reasonable call company presence at some of the neighborhood stations within the community. And that breaks down to, we have 4 full-time equivalent command staff, which I introduced you to. We have 2 administrative assistants, Julie Sanford, who is my executive assistant, and I would be nowhere without her. I would like to definitely give her the kudos. And Megan Rio, who is also, she does a lot of our accounts payable and accounts receivable stuff. So, and currently the breakdown is 32 full-time fire and EMS providers that are on the line riding fire trucks and ambulances. We have 53 part-time or day firefighters. And we are down to 34 call members. From the height, I'm sure some of you have heard, Chief, we were upwards of 300 call members back in the late 80s, early 90s. And we dwindled down to really 34 active members that are out there. Our budget drivers this year, three main components for that is the request of our 4 new FTEs to convert one per diem slot, 24-hour slot. And one of the unfortunate things about our positions are it takes 4 to fill 1. We operate on a 24-hour schedule. They work 24 hours a day. So it takes to fill 1 position to cover all 4 shifts takes 4 people. So that's why it's a little bit more of an ask. Obviously, utilities, electric and gas with 6 buildings that we operate out of. That was a really big hit. I was actually extremely shocked when we sat down and started talking about and crunching numbers and making estimates. It was very scary. We quickly were at that area 3 to 5% already with just utilities alone. As an example, one station alone went up almost $10,000 in electricity costs based on the estimates for the kilowatt per hour. And that's a significant.
Been crazy electricity this year.
And then, of course, the standard contractual obligations, as we are governed by a collective bargaining agreement with our full-time staff. That also was one of our budget drivers.
So a quick question for you. So your 24-hour folks, they all are domiciled in the public safety building
No,
when they're on duty, or were they?
currently we have them domiciled in both the public safety building, Dunstan Fire Station, North Scarborough, and Prouts Neck, Black Point Station.
Okay.
Thank you. They have all those stations are covered 24 hours a day now.
Thank you.
So I had a little bit of trouble trying to try and find a connection between alignment with council goals, but I think I came up with a couple that I think we really do. One of the things that we are going to offer this council and this finance committee and this council is that we are digging in really deep and evaluating our service delivery model based on, as we talked about in the CIP thing, do we have the right number of stations? Do we have too many stations? Do we have the right number of fire apparatus? Obviously, our personnel are less. Is there any efficiencies that we can find? And we are committed to digging into that now that we are fully staffed at the command staff level and determining what best way to identify efficiencies and ways to provide the highest quality emergency medical services. One of the things that's always in the back of my mind is Scarborough has had a high level of service for many, many years. And I want to make sure that whatever we do, we balance that and make sure that that service doesn't suffer. And then continuing the plan to annually transition from the per diem workforce to our more sustainable and controllable full-time model. And what I mean by that is our day firefighters or our per diems have become less and less reliable to count on. We have a minimum staffing of 7 members on duty, and that really pertains to the collective bargaining unit that we're able to keep them. And what that means is we have one person is the shift commander that runs the day-to-day operations when we're not around. And we have 4 people on an ambulance and 2 more people left for the fire truck. And essentially that leaves 1 fully staffed. If we get to minimum manning, which unfortunately in the summertime, we've had some instances where we get to that minimum staffing level. We are really short in this community. And that really is a symptom of the unreliability of those day firefighters being available. They have other jobs that they work when they're not working with us. And some of them have just after COVID have decided that it's just not, it's not a good thing for them to be gone from their families or to be exposed or things like that. So that's really the day firefighter piece has really caused us to almost be in a crisis mode when it comes to staffing. And this conversion of part-time to full-time has become more and more urgent for us.
So Chief, when you say you have 4 people on an ambulance, you don't mean
2 on each. So we have 2 staffed ambulances, as Tom alluded to earlier. We have to have 2.
Great.
Yeah. And
If you had 2 incidents at a time and you're at minimum staffing,
2 fire incidents,
yeah,
we'd be relying on mutual aid, which we're fortunate to have. And but it's not a great insurance policy to rely on other communities to do our work for us.
Right.
The other alignment with council goals was definitely with the housing choice and homeless. the police department and us, we were just steadfast partners in trying to deal with this together as we sat in front of you several times. What our role really was, and I thank Deputy Chief Brennan, who was really a big part of, the inspections and making sure that we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. But we remain on the front lines, and our staff have been in close with the police department partners. We've been in close contact, but we want to make sure that wherever these homeless folks are, that they're in a place that we're not just warehousing people, that they're in a place that's safe, that's comfortable, and that it meets the standards and the codes, so that we're not putting them in a situation that is detrimental to them. Furthermore, our EMS force really had an increase in call volume with the transient population, and we worked really closely with Lauren Dembski Martin with referrals to try and get people resources and things like that. So we really were on the front lines of that piece, and we will remain there. And we look forward to continuing that partnership as that issue continues. We already talked about CIP. You have a question?
No.
Just want to get to my. So we did ask for 4 extra people, or 4 new people, to convert those positions, and that net cost came to about $122,000 if we kicked that in January. If that was approved for the January timeframe. If those positions aren't approved, there would certainly need to be an allocation back into the day firefighter to keep us at our current staffing levels. Because one of the things, our request for 4 people is not providing any additional service, any additional people. It's really just converting part-timers to full-timers.
Why are you waiting until January 2024 to staff? If, what's the reason for the timing?
We can step in there. This obviously with, there are some offsetting costs where we're reducing a part-time line to
see.
increase. This is really a budget maneuver to make it palatable.
Okay.
So we're proposing to bring those 4 new positions on in January, as well as the 2 additional positions on PD,
Okay.
just to kind of stagger the impact to the overall budget.
Thank you.
And frankly, the reality is if you were to fund this for, July 1st, we wouldn't be able to fill those positions for July 1. I mean, it's just the realities of the.
We would be
situation.
somewhere in the November, December timeframe before we actually get off the ground anyway.
Well, good for you that you planned in the lead time and done it that way. So.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is when we get to next year's budget, there'll be,
I'll be asking.
the impact will be
It'll be
contained.
fully loaded.
I understand.
On top of that, as Chief Holmquist mentioned, I'll be here asking to continue this conversion to get us to that point as the staffing plan. And I want to apologize. I had every intention of having a fully vetted staffing plan to present to you this year. But as we dug in, every time we looked at something, as good as the work that Chief Thurlow did, more questions came up for us. And again, getting to that efficiency. Do we want to do a staffing plan for 6 fire stations, or is there efficiencies that can be had? And I just don't have that experience yet, or that from the data. I've only had 1 budget underneath my belt, and I really want to understand that before I make any drastic changes that could impact the current service levels that the town of Scarborough appreciates and has. I will say, offsetting that start date to January, the only concern that I do have is there are some costs, as I put in my explanation, there are some overtime costs that could be incurred during that time that may dismiss some of those savings that we would see by pushing it off. But even so, I don't think we'd be able to get those people on board until October, November area.
But my guess is you have some factor you can use for projecting overtime costs. Is that how you're doing it, or?
Well, this year was very, very tough. We had several longtime employee outages for illnesses or injuries, and this year was a little bit tougher than. And again, being my first budget, I not having the experience from the past. Questions?
I want to just say, I followed your work closely, including the preview you gave us when this was approaching. So, and the same is true really for Chief Holmquist and public safety. You really sweat the details. It's quite clear you've thought, everything through. So I'm really comfortable with the request that you're making, and I'm very confident you've considered everything, in your recommendation, and you continue to validate it and update it. So I'm very comfortable with what you presented, and I would say this in general for both, our uniform services. We are really fortunate in Scarborough to have the level of support that we have from you, the level of community support and satisfaction that we have. And we know that is due to just plain hard work and diligence. So we do not take that for granted. So thank you.
I would like to take the opportunity to just to, as you asked the chief about some fleet stuff. We are already in discussions. One of the first items I did when I took over as chief was we backed away from some of our ancillary vehicle use that we use, and we are really evaluating what vehicles we need to have to move forward. As a matter of fact, we've had conversations. We have a monthly meeting with the police, and we're already talking about if there's any, like for the public safety building and plowing, can we share an asset instead of having multiple things? So those conversations are happening, and we agree that understanding what the needs of the fleet are. So I want to let you know that we are looking at it already.
Thank you.
Karen?
I appreciate the time and effort that you've put into the new staffing structure and things like that. And I just want to say, I think I again appreciate that you're now reevaluating. I mean, I can't imagine when we created all these different fire stations, what our town looked like at that time. And I'm realizing now, despite the fact that I live next to Pine Point, and that this town has just changed a lot, and it probably doesn't make sense to go. And so it also doesn't make sense to right away, brand new, reevaluate and just one off. So that makes sense to me. I will ask what your plan is for Pine Point this summer, because it's not staffed, and I didn't know if there was plans to staff it at all.
As of right now, we have a meeting tomorrow that we're going to be talking with the crews down there and see if there's some options for that. Again, it's not a fiscal issue. It's really whether or not I can get the people. And what we have done over the last year, when we've been short, is we've identified the areas where we have the most call volume, and that's where we're putting the people. And unfortunately, I know there's a higher increase in usage down at Pine Point, as well as Pleasant Hill, which is also affected. But we really, we have alternatives. For Pine Point, we have Dunstan Station, which is another 3.3 miles away with a fully staffed, full-time staffing in that station that can make those runs fairly quickly. On top of the fact that Pine Point has one of the most robust call companies
They show
in
up so
town,
quickly.
and they show up in mass too.
They do.
It's one of the reasons why we made the decision to not put paid staff in that station when we didn't have the opportunity. And same thing with Pine Point. Pine Point actually has a higher call volume than, I'm sorry, Pleasant Hill has a higher call volume than Pine Point. So if I was to find extra people, I would probably start moving over to Pleasant Hill.
Thank you for setting my expectations.
No, their population is consistent year round. Their call volume is pretty consistent. So that's kind of, I would love to be able to do that. I just don't know if that's going to be a reality.
There's also some promising signs with call division.
Yes.
There, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Pleasant Hill also has another station that's very robust, and they turn out for call. There's been very few calls that they have not been able to make, and we do have a fail time built into our dispatch center, where if somebody doesn't sign on within 3 minutes, the next station, which is Black Point, will be en route very quickly. So, and that keeps us within our response parameters that NFPA sets for our response times. So.
Do you feel like your department is big enough to support a town this size?
No. But I think that we're going to come up with a plan that we're going to be able to give you that will show where we need to go and how to get there over time. We understand that it's not as simple as just same thing as the Chief Holmquist was asked last year if he could have more, if he could take more people. Even if you gave it to us, I don't think we'd be able to find them at this point. The workforce just isn't there.
Looks good. Thank you.
So great job, guys. I just want to say a couple of years ago was a massive transition in public safety between the retirements and bringing you guys on. And I just have extreme confidence in where we're headed. I think you've both done a fantastic job. I think you're professional, deliberate, thoughtful about where we're going, not trying to react too quickly. So thank you for everything that you guys are all doing. We're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on anything that we have discussed this evening? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Yeah.